Good evening and welcome to the Long Meadow Select Board meeting of July 21st. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda tonight is announcements, and I don't believe we have any. I've not seen any listed, so we'll...
We neglected at our last meeting, Jeffrey Ron, who was on our Board of Assessors, passed away, and I know we know about it, but we didn't publicly acknowledge that, and I just want to extend our condolences to the Ron family and thank them for Jeff's service to the town, and we omitted that at our last meeting.
Yeah, you're right, Paul. Yeah, thank you for remembering that, Paul. Resident comments? Yes, sir.
Yes.
You can come up and take a seat over there, and please give your name and address for the record.
My name is Lou Robin. I'm at 942 Long Meadow Street, and I've been following some of the comments, articles about SelectNet and their purchase of a home in Long Meadow. And as a resident of Long Meadow, I would just like to express some services to the board and to SelectNet. Are you? Oh, okay. I have a very simple word for SelectNet, our new neighbor, and that word is welcome. Long Meadow is a wonderful, wonderful town. Its residents are kind, thoughtful, caring, and will go out of their daily routine to be helpful. They give their time to their schools, to their churches, synagogues, and other places of worship, various charities, and those in need. They appreciate what they have, and they know that such good fortune means that they have had a burden placed on them to extend a hand to those less fortunate. They understand that the fabric of this country is composed of many different threads, which only makes this country stronger. And though we may not appear to be as diverse as other aspects of this country, each of us has had some element of struggle, individually or in our family's heritage, that is representative of the American heritage and fabric. Unfortunately, I have heard some words that are less than kind. They are persuaded by fear, which is regrettable, as we are a country that is particularly proud of its bravery and courage. I am embarrassed and disappointed by their words, but their weakness only strengthens my and others' resolve in welcoming them. Let me add two thoughts. I understand that ServiceNet, in their care, have those who have suffered traumatic brain injuries. To the extent that this includes injured veterans, I am truly humbled by their sacrifice to make our homes and world safe. I would like them to extend my thanks to them for, and if I can borrow a phrase, for their sacred honor. And I've heard words of another resident that stated, and I quote, "I speak on behalf of all neighborhoods. Nobody would want this in their neighborhood," end quote. To this I respond, there are several homes in my immediate neighborhood that are for sale, and I would be so pleased if they could purchase one and I could call them a neighbor. Finally, I end this as I began. Welcome. Thank you.
Could you please spell your last name?
Robin, R-O-B-I-N.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more visitor comments or resident comments? Okay, we're going to move on to select board comments.
I think somebody just...
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I wasn't quick enough.
Okay.
My name is Bernie Cohen. I live at 98 Converse Street in Long Meadow. And I would say I'm a fairly recent resident of Long Meadow, having moved from Springfield in 2006. And we lived in the McKnight neighborhood, which was an old historic neighborhood. And the houses there were ideal for group homes for any number of groups: disabled veterans, people who are mentally ill, people with developmental disabilities. And while McKnight certainly had its share of problems in terms of drugs, in terms of violence, None of the problems came from any of the group homes. My children were free to walk around the neighborhood, met the people in the group homes, and were very comfortable with the residents. In fact, it was an enriching experience for our children to have people who were otherwise abled living in our neighborhood and in our community. So like Mr. Robin, I too was discouraged when I heard that there was resistance to putting such a group home in Long Meadow. One of the problems with Long Meadow, in my opinion, is that we are not a diverse community at all. There are many people who live here who believe that they live here because they want to escape the diversity of Springfield and other like communities. I'm involved in housing in this community and met with the same resistance when we presented some proposals for more affordable housing in Long Meadow. There's a fair amount of community resistance to that as well, for the same reasons. I think it, as Mr. Robbins stated, it's out of fear and it's out of not knowing what other people will bring. But I know that my wife and I, who's also here today, we support an open community, a community that welcomes people of all abilities, and we hope that this community will rethink their position if you're opposed to it, and just keep an open mind and recognize that the people who live in these homes they are the children of other people, but they could just as easily be our children. They're but for the grace of God. So let's consider that any one of us or our children could be living in that home, and we would all want them in the community close to us. So thank you.
Can you spell your last name?
C-O-H-E-N.
Can I get a comment in?
Yes, sir. Come over to the mic.
Dave Yeager, 67 Parkside Street. I drive for Humes Transport Services. We transport the handicapped. I go to 2 homes every day, one in Westfield, one in West Springfield. I saw in the paper, I didn't make the last meeting, but I saw in the paper that some people said that's going to lower the property values, these homes. Anybody who wants to come up to me after the meeting, I'll go to all 4 houses that surround the 2 homes I go to and ask them if they think that has lowered their property values. And I'll bet you they'll say no. They're on Bernie Road and Woodsong Road in Westfield, Bernie Road in West Springfield. Anybody who wants to come up to me after the meeting, I'll go to those 4 houses and I'll prove to you that they don't lower property values. And I've had my piece.
Can you just spell your last name?
Y-E-A-G-E-R.
Would anybody else like to speak? Resident comments? Going once? Because I missed it before. Okay, fine. We'll move on to select board comments.
I guess I'd just like to respond to some of the comments that we just heard. I don't think there has been any ugly comments that have been made against group homes or against the disabled. I've raised questions of a legal nature. One, whether these group homes are, or in this particular case, the group home on Red Fern Drive is consistent with our zoning bylaws, and whether it's consistent with the Dover Amendment. I prepared a 9-page memorandum that cited facts and case law. I think I'm entitled to do that. I think anybody's entitled to have a different opinion about the facts and the law without being branded insensitive or less than caring. Nothing that I've said, I don't think, can be fairly construed, and I don't think anything that any of the residents have said could be fairly construed as being against the disabled or against group homes per se. The question is a zoning question. And I hope we still live in a community where people can disagree about the law. What I would hope is that whatever set of zoning bylaws that we have, that we stick to it. And if we want to change the zoning bylaws to make it more open to group homes, then that's the debate we ought to be having. I don't think it's proper to try to shoehorn a use into a set of bylaws where it doesn't fit. And I think the resistance to that diminishment of the zoning bylaw system that we have is not discriminatory. In fact, there's nothing in our zoning bylaws that says anything against the disabled or the handicapped. I think it's just far too easy to brand somebody who's raising questions, and a lot of that's what's been going on, is questions, because there's been a lack of facts that have been presented in a verifiable way. So, so I guess that's that's what I'd have to say to the point. I think it's unfair to brand people who've raised these questions as being less than kind.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Any other select board comments? Okay. Oh, by the way, you notice that Marie's not here tonight. She's on vacation down in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay, let's move on to town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I've been sitting there patiently. I'd like to introduce Paul Seifert, our new Veteran Service Officer, and I'd invite Paul to just give a brief introduction of himself.
You have 20 minutes, by the way,
I
Paul.
got 20 minutes?
Yes.
I'll use up every minute. No, just kidding. My name's Paul Seifert. I'm the new Veteran Services Officer for Long Meadow, as Stephen just stated. I come from many years in the American Legion and VFW helping out veterans, and it's sort of just progressed that I got into Veteran Services helping out veterans, and here I am, and I'm looking forward to it. This town has been nothing but nice to me. I just started my 3rd week, and everyone has been super nice, and all the veterans are great. It's an honor for me to be here. It truly is. And I'm looking forward to serving your veterans, and I'm going to do a lot of outreach to make sure that we don't let any veterans who are in need of help or just any type of veteran-related stuff, to make sure they don't slip through the cracks. I promise you that, and we'll take care of our guys returning home, and ladies, of course. Don't get me wrong there. And thank you for bringing up traumatic brain injury earlier about our veterans. That was very nice of you to say that. Yes, we do, and it's my job, and I promise you I will take care of them.
Paul, do you want to just maybe say your phone number so if people watching have someone they want to get in touch with you for benefits or something like that?
Sure, yeah, yep. My office is open Monday through Friday, 9 to 3 at the Adult Center on 231 Maple Street. I'm kind of new, so I have to look and see what my phone number is. But yep, 231 Maple Street in the Adult Center, Monday through Friday, 9 to 3. That's my hours, and my phone number is 413-565-4150. That's 565-4150.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're all set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Speaking of the Adult Center, the Executive Director, Emily Perkins, was recently appointed to the Massachusetts Council on Aging Advisory Board, which is a statewide position. I think it's a great honor for her, being on the job here, to be recognized by her peers statewide and selected for this advisory board. But I also think it's a great way to enhance the services she provides to the town by being connected to information sharing throughout the state and being able to help guide policy for councils on aging in the future. So congratulations to Emily on that. I'll just briefly go through the report I submitted. The projects that were approved at town meeting, some of the bidding has been completed. In fact, some of the work has started. Colton Place, the sewer project, has started. You can see that later in the report. But the track, the replacement of the surface of the track is, just want to report to the board that the bids came in higher than the estimate, and the schools have encumbered some excess fiscal year 2014 funds to help offset the gap. Those funds would have otherwise been turned back to the general funds.
Can I ask, how does that happen? That, for example, if we had a capital project that was, the estimates came in overbid, we have to delay it or wait till the next town meeting and so forth, because we can't, because what's appropriated, we can't sign the contract and so forth. So, to me, it's similar. So how does the school committee, just by saying, here's money for the project, when we can't do that for, if we were bidding out one of the water and sewer projects and it was more than what we allocated at town meeting, what's the difference between the two? Because I've always been under the assumption that we can't do that, and if, either that we've been shortchanging ourselves, or.
Well, I'll take that question a little bit more. Paul, by the way, we do have a capital project, what I'll call excess
Prior to setting that up,
allowance fund. No, not prior to setting fund. We have $25,000 we put aside every year, so if a project comes in $1,000 over estimate, we don't have to delay it.
No, but prior to setting it up, the scenario was if it came in overbid.
Significantly overbid,
We
right.
couldn't
But
do it.
My concern about this is it within the school committee's jurisdiction to do this? I mean, can they encumber funds for a water project? Can they encumber what makes the track under their jurisdiction? Because those funds would otherwise be returned to the town. So they're funds that were not spent in fiscal year 2014. They've carried them over, and they've decided to designate them for the track, which is nice of them to do, and clearly it benefits the students, but, they don't own the track. The town owns the track, I thought. And how do we, and I'm not asking you for a legal opinion, Stephen, but the question is, can they encumber the funds because they want to? And does state law, and maybe since our town council is here, at some point I'm going to put him on the spotlight, what can the school department encumber funds for in terms of a capital? Clearly, if we had to do with operating the school department, I stood up at the town meeting and said they ought to encumber funds for that kindergarten issue, and they chose not to, and that's an operational budget. But this is clearly not operation of the school department, and I'm very, very much questioning whose authority they have to do that. It's the town's money.
Well, I would say that the primary user of the track is the athletic department. And so it is, even though the town, the DPW under the charter owns all the lands and buildings, it is technically a facility that is used predominantly by the school. The school districts or school departments generally under state law enjoy more broad flexibility to move funds between accounts than the town does, and a lot of that has to do with they may get an enrollment of students who have higher needs or something like that drive the budget. And the school department, Tom Mazza would have to probably, or the superintendent would have to speak to that more detailed than I can. But the the school committee voted to do this. I think to some extent it depends, Paul, to go back to your question. It depends on what the project is for, how much the gap is, what other funding sources are out there. There are cases, I'm sure, where you would have to go back to town meeting if the funding source was a general fund bond and it wasn't sufficient because the debt service to pay that bond was in the budget. If it was a case of water or sewer funding, you could perhaps look at retained earnings, and the select board, as water and sewer commissioners, could just vote at the next meeting to appropriate the funds. I think this is a similar situation with the school committee having once the budget is approved at town meeting, I think the school committee does enjoy some control over their funds, and I think this is the appropriation gets made under those auspices. Typically, I'm surprised that this is one of the capital projects that we spent a lot of time planning and brought in, the expert, I think, who ended up bidding on the job to help us develop a scope of work. So I was surprised to see that the bid came back so much higher. Typically, we are conservative, so the bids come back lower and you don't end up in this situation. But I can certainly get a more detailed report from the schools if you'd like.
Well, I just think people ought to hear that the project we thought was the town was told, and the community preservation funds approved $87,300. The project came in $49,629 above that. So we didn't miss by 5%, we didn't miss by 10%, we missed by 55% in our estimate. And so this isn't we're not talking, if it was $1,000 or $1,200, I probably wouldn't be wasting our time. But it's $49,629 of town money that has been appropriated by the school committee, essentially, to supplement a project where the townspeople thought it was going to cost $87,300 and now costs $136,000. I would argue that, since the town only appropriated $87,300, they may not want this project at a cost of $136,000. And to spend the town money at that extra funds is something that's problematic to me. I mean, $49,629 is a lot of money. And Stephen, I understand you didn't do this. You didn't appropriate the extra funds, but I think we need to talk about a substantial amount of difference. It's not just $5, it's not even $5,000, it's 55% of the money. So I think it ought to go back to town meeting, even if it goes to the November town meeting, because it missed by that much. It's my personal opinion.
One of the unique features of the school department budget is the ability to move money between lines, as
Absolutely, I understand that. Why don't you come so people can hear you beside me? But could they move money to the water department?
Pardon?
I mean,
Well, no, it'd have to
a
be
capital
once
improvement's not a line item.
The school department was given a chunk of bottom line money at the town meeting. And within that total bundle of funds, they can pretty much do what they want. Now, I'm assuming.
Within the school department. They can't put that money toward the department.
Correct. But as Stephen indicated, this is primarily a school department facility. And
Okay.
so, as long as they stay within the bottom line amount that they were given at town meeting, they can shift it between lines. That's the
Right.
beauty, if you want to call it
And this
that, of the
is,
school
and I
department
understand that. I mean, I understand that state law.
that's
But
what I
but everybody needs to understand, this is last year's money they didn't spend that they encumbered for this year. So it was last year's money, and it is school department money. I acknowledge and understand that.
It was approved last May as
As
the
part of
FY
a school
14 budget that
department
just,
budget.
the fiscal year that just
Oh,
ended June
I get
30th.
it.
Yeah, but not for you, this isn't for you.
Yeah, I know.
The thing I'll say is they did receive, after the budget was approved at town meeting, they received a higher chunk of, I think, circuit breaker money, several $100,000 that put them in a position to have surplus funds. That was unexpected. The other thing I'll say is we can't host track meets. And I believe we pay to go run track, like we pay rent or fees to go run track other places. And this was by far the top priority for the schools as they submitted their capital planning items. So I see why it was important enough for them to decide to make the appropriation. In terms of the question of why was the bid so far off, that I can have a detailed report on, but it was, like I said, I think to some extent, the level of investigation it's really, there's a rubberized surface covering a cement base, and the level, and all they're doing is scraping off, actually there's 3 layers. There's a top layer, a middle layer, and then the cement base. And the condition of that middle layer, they thought was a lot better than it turned out to be when it came time to do the bidding. And so that's roughly why the scope of the project expanded, because it's really a unit price. There's a lot more linear feet of that stuff to do. But like I said, I will happily get a report on that.
Can you also ask Dr. Weiss from our community preservation, what their take is on this, since they actually voted the to recommend the $87,300 come from their funds? Clearly, it's not costing community preservation any additional funds, but was their intent to pay part of it or pay all of it, or would this have even gotten to their top?
They funded it at 87. I can tell you that we submitted the project with a contingency, and they struck the contingency out of the project. So instead of being 49 from the schools, it probably would have been 45 or so, or less than that. But I think to go back over all of that really gets in the way of getting the track done. And I think that the key priority for all the other stakeholders was to get the track open as soon as possible. But I'll look into that.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one last comment on this. I want to just remind all the people at home, and I can't tell you the exact year, but I remember sitting in town meeting when citizens came forward and said, we're gonna raise the funds, and my family contributed funds. We've got a brick over there like a whole bunch of other people do, but and this track will never cost the town any money because we've all done it with private citizens' funds, and here we are now, not that many years later, needing $136,000 to renovate it. And it should be an example for us as we move forward with, potential gifts to the town that aren't going to cost us any money, and that we may have to go back not too long after that and spend some real money on.
The Romans taught us that lesson too, didn't they?
Oh, Richard?
Yes.
I mean, that's so the track, I mean, as I understand, that was a good 10 or 15 years ago. Am I right? This isn't like, the sports stadium, the $500 million sports stadium that's obsolete, shortly after it's built. I mean, it had its useful life. I don't think anybody could really say there was a bait and switch on that one.
From what I understand, it did, for the most part, fulfill its use life. I think the construction going on around it for 2 years probably hastened its demise a little bit, but from what I understand, none of the meetings that I attended, no one felt that we got ripped off or the thing didn't fulfill what we thought we bought. So, similarly, the Blinn Tennis Court, just a brief thing. We've retained a consultant that specializes in tennis court design and construction oversight to just kind of peer review our in-house specs, and that process is underway. I had reported on the lease that the select board approved a lease for the Stebbins for the town land that eventually will or possibly could become part of Fish and Wildlife Refuge, the Silvio Conti Refuge. It has gotten a little more complicated as some of the land that may be affected by it is under the control of the Conservation Commission, and they have met with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we are awaiting an opinion in terms of is a town meeting vote needed for to enter into that lease. So that issue is on hold until we sort all that out. Talked previously about a bylaw review. The ZBA and the planning board, town council, myself and the building commissioner got together to identify frequently recurring issues that impact whether it's decision-making by those boards or enforcement of town bylaws, both on the general side and the zoning side. And we identified, I think I list them here. We identified some definitions that aren't clear or aren't defined in the code. It's things like parking in front yards and things that may not be clearly either allowed or disallowed. And over the next month or so, we'll be looking for best practices in other communities and examples of bylaws. And the goal is to, make this an ongoing process, but at least get one package of recommended changes processed and recommended to town meeting in the fall. FLOCA, the Friends of the Long Meadow Council on Aging, have offered to donate some funds to enhance the Greenwood Center dining room, and that work would be done in conjunction with the improvements to the kitchen that were approved at town meeting. I think it's generous for FLOCA to do this, and it'll be a much-needed upgrade to some of the cabinetry and built-in things that will make the experience for diners much more pleasant. I won't go through all the projects individually, but like I said, for the folks on Colton Place, that project is underway. Colton Place will be closed to through, it really isn't through traffic, it's a dead-end street, but that'll be about 8 weeks. And the other things are in process, either out to bid or bids received, and we're working to get a notice to proceed. So If anybody has any questions about the individual projects, let me know. And I'll
Yes.
I had a question. On the Laurel Street project, last night I was running, and I mentioned this because this has been an issue. There was a hole. There was a steel plate, but it wasn't big enough. I don't know. Did you hear about this? Because it was so concerning to me that I called the dispatcher. He said they had sent somebody out there, but it was still there. So, given that we've had issues before about manholes being left unattended, this was in the middle of the road. There was no warning about it. I think probably a car's tire wouldn't fit in there, but a motorcycle probably would have, tire would have fell in there. Somebody could have broken their leg. So I think that's something that we ought to look more closely at.
I have not heard of that, but we will look into that. The good news, I think, is that I think it's good news, but all of the pipe work, the excavation, should be done either by the end of this week or early next, and then they'll be doing patching the trench and kind of cleaning up there. So that project is near completion.
Richard, can I, one other
Yes.
thing? Again, just because this has come up before, the gate to the DPW, I observed it open again. It was probably 6:30, 7 o'clock. I counted 11 vehicles plus the 2 trucks by Northern Tree. I know we've talked about how some of those vehicles aren't of much value, but a number of them actually are licensed. They have license plates on them, so they do seem to have value. Given that we had discussed this, over different meetings, and there was sort of a decision made that we weren't going to do that anymore, I just kind of wonder what's going on. I felt like the last time we discussed this, you had agreed that that shouldn't be happening anymore. I'm sure, you've conveyed that to your people, and it's just kind of perplexing why something as simple as that, keeps happening where there's so much risk of loss to the town.
I want to separate the two issues, if I may. The risk of loss to the town is actually low because the vehicles are older vehicles that are being cycled out. The Northern Tree stuff they store there at their own risk. The gas pumps can only be used with a key and a code. So, there's the stuff, the things the assets that need to be protected are in a different section of the yard that is separated with a different gate. And you can't really get to that section through the open section. And, the gate itself is less than 6 feet tall. And so if someone wanted to steal a truck, that's one thing, but if someone wanted to do damage to something, they could just hop the gate pretty easily. The DPW folks lock it when they leave. Police and fire go in there to fill up their vehicles. It's possible they get called away or something and just don't close it behind them. I have mentioned it, but we'll continue to press on it. But it's not the risk to the town is very low in that gate being open. And like I said, someone could just hop over it pretty easily anyway.
We could have had at least a half a dozen vehicles that we've seen fit to have inspected, put license plates on. I don't know what the valuation on all of them, and they could have been gone. So I don't know. It's perplexing to me when we discuss this issue. The first thing that I hear is it's not that big of a deal, but I'll check on it. It seems very simple. And I guess the other concern I have is that by leaving it open, anybody who has a key would be able to fill up any vehicle that they wanted to, right?
The
guess.
pumps is a carded system.
Yeah, you turn the key, enter your employee code, and then the
Okay.
mileage of your
Yeah.
vehicle that you're in, and they run monthly reports of the gas. And so if a vehicle mileage came up, if there was no regularity, they catch it that way. That exists.
That's a pretty good secured system on the gas.
There's no way to eliminate all risk. I don't.
Okay.
I will put out another
Okay.
directive about the gate. I agree with you. It's frustrating that it continues to happen.
I'll chat with Stephen later about the issue again, too. Okay, yes.
Stephen, I had a couple of questions. Can you just go over, and you don't have to do it tonight, but just in your report, you talked about the funding for Colton Place, and it looks like the bids were a little higher than we thought they were. Can you just send us a note in the next week or two about the difference between what we thought it was going to be and what the bid came in, and how we're going to cover that minor difference? I think I already know the answer. That's going to come out of the fund we have for overages. And the other thing is that
I'll do it for all of them.
okay, the road resurfacing list. I actually had somebody, a resident, who's been complaining to me for many years about their street, and their street was on the list, and I emailed them that, okay, your street's on the list. Is there a way, if it hasn't already been put on our website, we can put this list on the website so people in town can see the streets that are scheduled to be paved? I think they'll appreciate the fact that their street is on the list.
We had the map for FY14 that we had put on the web. We just haven't updated it yet. But
Okay.
we will do that.
Yeah, okay, and I guess I had a question about painting one of the corridors in the high school. I know you just got the report, you know, I'm just curious of why we're doing it from maintenance unless there was something happened it's strange. It came up, said the corridor in the A wing, from the administrative office to the pool locker rooms was painted. Now, I know this was part of the renovation, but I would have thought the project would have done that. I thought that was pretty.
I think it had been painted. I think they went with I think they changed color. I think it had gotten pretty beat up by kids leaning against the wall, and
Yeah,
so I think
that's
that was a wear
That's
and tear
pretty-
issue.
Pretty minor thing.
Yeah.
The only other question I have, and it wasn't in the part you gave, is I noted in one of a couple of the other reports, a lot of comments about our sewer pumping station on Emerson Road. Is there any possibility that the select board we can just arrange, we put a lot of money into that place just to get a tour and see what we've done? Maybe
That's a great idea. You should. It's really transformed. It's transformed partially at the end of this next phase when they move the generator from inside to outside. It'll be really a remarkable It'll complete a remarkable
Maybe the same
transformation.
for the water pumping station on Forest Glen, but I know we spent a lot of money there. It might be worth seeing for us to see where our money went. Thank you.
And the last thing I want to announce is that Cheryl Kudnick, who has been our assistant treasurer collector for a number of years, has been appointed treasurer collector for the town. So I want to congratulate her.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Alex, thank you for reporting that safety issue to the police. Old business, consent agenda, we have nothing. Old business, we've got some minutes we need to approve. I'll accept a motion for the June 4th, 2014.
I move to approve the June 4th, 2014 minutes as submitted.
I'll second it.
Discussion? All approved?
Aye. I move to approve the June 16th, 2014 minutes as submitted.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. On a roll, Paul.
Yeah, you're doing good.
All right, I'll pass a budget item next. We'll see how that.
Yeah.
You want one for the June 23rd?
Yeah? do.
I'll move we approve the June 23rd, 2014 special minutes. Meetings.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Alex? Oh, you did vote, excuse me. And July 7th?
I'll move we approve the July 7th, 2014 minutes.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye. See, those I don't have in my packet. I had the
Boy,
first two.
you made out, didn't you?
That's a first. Wow.
You got them all
It's the first time I've seen that.
approved.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next element, our next item on the old business. It's a presentation by ServiceNet. But before we start, are you guys set up with a computer now, okay? You are okay? Okay. For the last 3 or 4, or last couple of meetings, we've had a lot of concern voiced by the citizens, and the end result is that we reached out and requested that ServiceNet come in and talk to the select board on some of the concerns that have been brought up, and to generally review the operation. And I might add, ServiceNet is under no obligation to have met this request by our community. But I do thank you for doing this. I think you've showed a good neighbor status in reaching out to do this. I realize that you've talked with our attorney on several occasions on some of these issues, and I appreciate your patience along with the patience we've had to have in trying to get this issue resolved to the satisfaction of all. So if you don't mind, you can come on up and take the recital area. And you'll need to put your name on record with the recording secretary. You already have them, though. But for the record, you can say who you are.
My name is Tom Miranda. I'm an attorney from Northampton.
Oh, can you please spell your last name?
Miranda.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for hearing from ServiceNet this evening. What I would like to do is I'd like to introduce Abbas Hamdan. He's Vice President of Developmental Disabilities and Brain Injury. His department is going to be, he's the head of the department, is going to be running the group homes in Long Meadow. And he'll give a presentation as to the services that his department runs, the general background of the employees that will be there, their training, et cetera. He'll also talk about the work that is done with the individuals who reside in or will reside in the homes. As I'm sure you are aware, we cannot get into any real specifics about any of the individuals in the sense of where they're coming from, who they are, what their injuries are, the types of medications, things of that, because of privacy issues and regulations. But he will give you as much information as he possibly can with regard to what's going to go on in the homes. Mr. Bruce Barshevsky is Vice President of Administration and Finance. He'll present an overview of the organization's financial, who it is, its organizational charts, funding, things of that nature, so you know where the money is coming from for the programs that are run by ServiceNet. And then Sue Stubbs, who's the President and CEO of ServiceNet, will start the presentation by giving you a background on ServiceNet itself, the history of ServiceNet, and where it's come over the past, I'm going to say about 35 years at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Susan?
Sue, could you say your name for the record?
Yes, Susan Stubbs, President and CEO of ServiceNet.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us to the meeting. We're happy to share information about ServiceNet and specifically, as much as we can, about the programs that will be opening in Long Meadow. First, I want to just say a little bit about the history of ServiceNet. It was founded in 1965, originally by a group of concerned citizens, most of whom were family members of patients who were in Northampton State Hospital, people with mental illness. And they came together to advocate for better care and treatment of their loved ones. And around that time, there was a national movement towards deinstitutionalizing a lot of the state hospitals around the country and institutions for people with what used to be called mental retardation. Now we call it developmental or intellectual disability. So our organization back in those days was approached in conjunction with the downsizing of Northampton State Hospital, and we were provided funding to open some of the first group homes in Western Massachusetts. We opened our first group home in 1975, and it was designed for people with serious mental illness who had been inpatients in the state hospital, and they moved into community-based settings into that group home, and then shortly thereafter, we received funding for several other group homes. I came on the scene in 1980, so I've been with the organization for 34 years. I was originally hired as the clinical director, but shortly after I came on board, the previous CEO decided to leave, and I decided to apply for his job. My background is clinical, though I had had some administrative experience before coming to the organization. At the time that I joined ServiceNet, we had 25 employees and 3 group homes, and we had a budget of under $1 million. And over the years, we've grown rapidly because of the deinstitutionalization of both Northampton State Hospital and Belchertown State School. We branched into services for developmental disabilities and brain injuries, and we also opened up some homeless shelters in the Pioneer Valley. In 2009, we merged. We've had several mergers through the years. which has been responsible for some of our growth. We've also been approached and asked to take on more contracts to open more group homes under contract by the state of Massachusetts Department of Developmental Services and the State Department of Mental Health, and more recently, to serve the brain-injured population. That funding comes from the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. I have provided a written history of ServiceNet, so I won't go into any more detail, but it's in your packets. It has several other dates and milestones of growth of the organization. But I would say that because of the high quality of care that we provide and the high quality of the homes that we've opened around Western Massachusetts, I believe that's part of why we have grown so rapidly and why the funding agencies come to us when they want to open, often come to us when they want a provider, a service organization to open new group homes. I would also call your attention, there's a brochure in your packet called Guide to Services, which has an overview of the organization as it looks today. And I'm going to go into a little more detail about that now in the PowerPoint. Is it?
Just press that button and have you want to move. There you go.
Our mission is to enhance the quality of life for people in need through the provision of effective and responsive clinical, residential, and rehabilitative services. First, I'm going to talk about the developmental and brain injury services, though I'm going to go over briefly the whole organization, just so you have an overview of the different services that we provide. So we have 38 group homes in that division, which Abbas is the vice president of, as Tom mentioned. 17 of them are in Hampshire County, 15 in Hamden, 4 in Berkshire County, and 2 in Franklin County. I might add that one of our homes under this category of developmental disability and brain injury services happens to be in Long Meadow already. And we've had that for about 4 years. And we serve 148 clients in those group homes. We also have shared living slots, which is similar to foster care, whereby someone with a developmental disability will live in a person's home and become sort of part of the family. We also have work crews that train people in vocational services, and we have an intensive outreach program that serve another 40 people who live on their own, but who need some support in order to get through their lives seamlessly. We have a day program for people with brain injuries, which serves 23 people. Altogether, 237 clients are served and 332 total staff in the Developmental and Brain Injury Services division of ServiceNet. The next area that we have is called clinical services. We have 5 outpatient clinics, and those serve people from all walks of life. Some of you may have seen these clinics around, and they are not just for people with serious disabilities or mental illnesses, but they serve people from all walks of life. We take about 200 different insurance companies' payments for the services, so many middle-class working people, upper-class people come to our clinics, and they're in Northampton, Greenfield, Amherst, Holyoke, and Pittsfield. And one of the services that we serve through outpatient services is in-home therapy, which is done in the home, as it says, for children and families, and that's just in Hampshire and Franklin counties. We also have a batterers intervention service. When people are arrested for spousal or partner abuse, if it's a first offense or if it's not terribly serious, they're sometimes offered the option of going into a group treatment setting instead of going to jail. And those treatments are very successful. It's a group therapy. We also have some services in the houses of corrections in Franklin and Hampshire counties. We have an after-school intensive program for children, one in Northampton, one branch in Northampton, one in Greenfield. We have an early intervention program which serves children birth to 3 who have disabilities or who are at risk of having a disability, and it's an early program with a multidisciplinary team of nurses and speech therapists and physical therapists, among others. We also have a home care, which is usually known as visiting nurses, but we specialize in people with psychiatric and developmental disabilities. When they have a surgery or an accident and they need home health services, our team goes out to the home and provides that. In our clinical services division, we serve 6,555 clients a year, and we have a total of 491 staff. Mental Health Recovery Services is the branch of our organization that serves people with serious mental illness. We have 6 group homes in that category, serving 4 to 6 people each with serious mental illness. And the locations of the homes, we have 3 in Hampshire County, 2 in Franklin County, and 1 in the North Quabbin region, and some outreach teams that serve the same group. Those contracts are with the Department of Mental Health. Bruce will talk a little bit more about where our funding comes from for the different services, but those contracts only serve Franklin and Hampshire and North Quabbin. We don't have contracts to serve that population in this area. In that division is also a specialized service area for people, for youth with serious mental illness, and that includes a group home and several outreach teams, 2 outreach teams serving several clients, rather. The total number of clients served under Mental Health Recovery Services is 475, and we have a total of 159 staff. We also, as I mentioned before, have shelter and housing services for homeless people, and both individuals and families. We have 2 family shelters that serve 14 homeless families, 4 emergency shelters serving 80 homeless individuals, transitional and long-term housing, something called Housing Plus, which reaches out to chronically homeless individuals, and 2 drop-in centers for people who are homeless to help them get back on track with helping them write resumes and apply for jobs and that sort of thing. We provide our shelter and housing services only in Hampshire, Franklin, and Berkshire counties. Our most recent merger, by the way, was with an organization called Meridian, which was located in Pittsfield. So now we didn't prior to that have services in the Berkshires, and now we're in that county as well. Our shelter and housing services serve 508 people and employ 53 staff. We also have vocational services, individual supports that help people who have a variety of different challenges maintain employment, and those services are offered in Franklin, Hampshire, and Berkshire counties. And we also have community-based day programs, a community-based day program in Pittsfield that helps people develop skills so they can go out and get a job. About 5 years ago, we purchased a farm in Hampshire County called Prospect Meadow Farm, which is a working farm that trains people in agricultural skills and also helps provide healthy food for all our group homes throughout Western Mass. We serve 120 clients in our vocational services and employ 15 total staff. We also have services for people with addictions. We have 3 group homes in Franklin County. Those are programs that prior to 2009 were operated by Bay State Franklin Medical Center. And like many hospitals around the country, Bay State Hospital decided that they no longer wanted to do some of their more ancillary services that were not actually hospital-based. So they approached us in 2008, and we started talking. They wanted us to take on those programs, which we did. The 2 in Franklin County called Beacon House for Men and Beacon House for Women. Those are recovery homes. You may have heard of them. We also have a supported housing program in Franklin County for people with addictions. We serve about 103 clients per year in those services and employ 21 staff. In summary, we employ about 1,100 staff, and we provide services to approximately 10,000 clients a year across Western Massachusetts. And our annual revenues have grown to under $1 million from under $1 million when I started with the organization to this year's budget. We're in a fiscal year that just started July 1st, and our annual budget for the coming year is projected to be about $51 million. Before we do that, I wanted to just call your attention to, we have also provided you with an organization chart in your packets that has a visual that really summarizes all the parts of the organization that I've mentioned. And before I turn it over to Bruce, I just want to mention that since I've been with the organization for 34 years, I have been involved with the opening of all of our group homes, with the exception of the 3 that existed before I came. So I just want to say that I totally understand people's concerns. I don't resent or doesn't make us angry that people are concerned about these homes. It's a natural human reaction when it's the unknown. People don't know who these people are that are going to be moving next door, and it's not at all unusual for people to become very anxious and concerned when they find out that there's going to be a group home in their community. And I've said this many times to many groups. This is the first time, by the way, that we've ever been asked to come before an official body of a city or town before bringing people into a home. But that said, it's definitely not the first time that we've gone to community meetings, and we always try to be understanding and open, and we try to answer people's questions and do whatever we can to reassure people. And I know this is probably not going to reassure people, but I say it anyway, which is, in all of our experience, most of the anxiety goes away after people move into the homes, because these are just human beings, and as everyone probably knows, in every family, there's someone with a disability or someone that has a mental illness or an injury, and these people are no different from the people in our own families and amongst our own friends who are maybe less fortunate than the rest of us. And once people see these actual human beings, people are very charitable and very open, and we are good neighbors. I believe in some cases we've actually increased the property values in a community by making improvements that were badly needed in some of the houses that we've bought and rented over the years. So I just wanted to say that before I turn it over to Bruce to talk about the finances. Thank you all for having us.
I am Bruce Barshevsky, the Vice President for Administration and Finance at ServiceNet. This part of the presentation will elaborate on a lot of what Sue was just talking about and probably cover some new ground as well. The funding at ServiceNet, consistent with what Sue was saying, and it's very hard to see this slide, the Developmental and Brain Injury Services Division is the largest division within ServiceNet. Almost 50% of our revenue in the coming year will be for those services. The Clinical Services Division, which is the outpatient program, the visiting nurse program, and the early intervention program, amongst others, is just over 1/2 of the revenue for the organization. From whom we receive revenue is also consistent with that. On the right side of the pie chart is the Massachusetts Department of Developmental Services as our largest funder, combined with the Mass Rehab Commission, which is over in the kind of 9 o'clock position. That's 46% of our funding for these types of services. The 21% at the bottom, that is fees for clinical services, is mostly insurance payments. Medicare, Mass Health, dozens of insurance carriers, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Health New England, and many others. Besides state agencies, and there's a list of many of the state agencies that we receive funding from, we also have federal funding. Federal funding is mostly for our shelter services. At least 6 cities and towns also support our services. 2 United Ways, the Community Foundation, and many other public and private entities. We are a fairly large organization. We have not always been this size, as Sue was saying. We have experienced a lot of growth over the years. 20 years ago, we were 1/5 our current size in terms of revenue. A more recent period is over the past 6 years. We've increased the number of our programs by 42%, with about 120 programs today, and as Sue said, $51 million in revenue. Those 120 programs are spread across 25 cities and towns throughout western Massachusetts. We own 48 properties and rent 85 others at the present time. Depending upon the community and depending upon what services we have there, we are probably well known within that community, and I would say that we're also well regarded in those communities. Looking at that growth over the last several years, and to some extent throughout our 40-year history, is instructive about the type of organization that ServiceNet is and about the basis of the services that we provide. Broadly speaking, there are 4 primary reasons for our growth, and I think Sue covered most of these. Increased funding for existing programs is pretty basic. The other 3 are the ones that are more interesting and probably more relevant to tonight's discussion. We've made a growing demand for outpatient services through expansion, both within existing sites and by adding 3 new locations within the last few years. I would say that growth, as Sue indicated earlier, is indicative of the quality of these services and of the reputation of the agency as the organization of choice, both for professionals as a place to work and for individuals and families in need of a place to receive help. The next point is, several times over the years, as Sue mentioned, other human service organizations have come to us and asked us to merge with them or to take over operation of their programs. Bay State Franklin Medical Center has actually done that twice. Men's Resource Center in Amherst, the Berkshire Community Action Commission in Pittsfield, and Meridian Associates are just 4 of the ones that we have worked with in that time. Again, I would say that ServiceNet's reputation for quality and responsiveness is what stimulates these types of requests. And finally, and what's most germane to our new programs in Long Meadow, state agencies, such as the Department of Developmental Services and the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, regularly ask us to serve additional individuals. Again, we get these requests because of the quality of the services we provide, making a difference in the lives of the people in need. And I think this begs the question, where do all these, what I call people in need, come from? Part of what we do, and it's only a part, is that word deinstitutionalization. It means just what it appears to mean, getting folks out of institutions. ServiceNet's history in many ways parallels the Massachusetts history and even the country's history of deinstitutionalization. This is important in looking at the 2 new houses. If I could do a kind of a 40-year history in about 2 minutes, almost 40 years ago, the Brewster Consent Decree required the Commonwealth to create community-based services as a constitutional right. Individuals in Northampton State Hospital, or those who might have been confined there in the future, had a right to receive care in the least restrictive setting possible. Locking away people who were disabled, who were different, was no longer acceptable. At about the same time, a series of lawsuits under the name Ricci, a gentleman whose son was being housed in deplorable conditions in the Belchtown State School, established the same rights for developmentally disabled individuals, what was called mental retardation at the time. Again, people should receive services in the least restrictive, most normal, appropriate residential environment possible. Then, in 1999, the United States Supreme Court ruled that segregating persons with disabilities was discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that services, whenever possible, must be in the community. The language in the decision itself is striking in the Olmsted decision. Keeping those who can live in communities in institutions perpetuates unwarranted assumptions that they are incapable of or unworthy of participating in community life. And that confinement in an institution is diminishing in many ways. The struggle to provide community-based services wasn't over. What subsequently happened is that the horrific institutions of the recent past, state hospitals and state schools, were replaced by nursing homes. This slide says Roland v. Patrick. It was actually Roland v. Salucci in 2000. A subsequent lawsuit was Roland v. Patrick. And in the Roland v. Salucci settlement, again, we find that the provision of services for persons with developmental disabilities should be in a community setting whenever it is appropriate for the individual circumstances. Not in a nursing home, but in a community. Just a few years ago, in the Hutchinson class action, we find that institutionalized persons with brain injury must be free from discrimination and segregation in the provision of long-term care and should receive integrated community services. These court decisions and consent decrees and others, and laws such as the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Medicaid Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the Dover Amendment, and the Fair Housing Act, and so on, affirm that we all have the right, whether we are disabled or not, to live in the community. We do other things as well, but a large part of ServiceNet's history and a large part of ServiceNet today is providing services in the community to those who would otherwise be in institutions. It is important to note that the services that we're talking about are operated under what's called a closed referral system. Nobody can self-refer. We can't pick folks up off the street. They can only apply to state agencies. State agencies judge their eligibility and make referrals to us. We, along with the state, then decide if a particular home is appropriate for that individual. Over 50 of our sites are staffed residential programs of one sort or another. And a fair question then is, what does it mean to a neighborhood to have one of these programs in it? First, we care for our programs. We care for our houses. We have staff whose full-time jobs are to look after the houses and apartments we own and rent. We use licensed builders, electricians and plumbers, professional painters and landscapers, and other tradespeople. We also provide employment to some clients to help with lawn mowing, trimming, bushes, and the like. I do want to say that we're not perfect. We may be late in mowing the lawn or trimming bushes, or there may be other issues. When that occurs, tell us. We will be responsive. We provide phone numbers and/or email addresses for program managers, the CEO, and for property issues, our maintenance supervisor. He is the licensed contractor referred to on the slide. He knows our properties intimately and cares for each and every one of them as if it was his own. If you have a problem with it, he's going to have a problem with it. Some people have expressed concern about property values. Those concerns should be laid to rest. Numerous studies have shown, and a simple Google search would provide anyone with plenty of evidence, that these homes do not have a significant impact on property values or in the saleability of neighboring homes. These programs give people a chance at better lives. They are our neighbors and our family members, sons, daughters, siblings, parents, who caught a bad break and need some help. They deserve the right to live in a residence in the community. They have a clear legal right to do so. Now Abbas Hobden will talk more about these services and the staff who deliver them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
I don't have slides, so I'm just going to tell you what goes on. My name is Abbas Hamdan. I'm the Vice President of Development and Manager Services. So to talk about the two homes that, in Long Meadow. So the capacity is going to be 4 for each one. And the structure for the program, so there's a clinical director who's PhD that usually write the treatment plans and then overseen by clinicians, by master clinicians. Program director is somebody with experience, with bachelor, usually bachelor
Excuse me,
degree.
you might ought to pull that mic a little bit closer to you. I'm not sure the TV picked you up.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the staff are screened. They must have, clear CORE, and they trained in CPR, first aid, MAP, HIPAA, fire safety, and clinical trainings, whatever the diagnoses are for the individuals. The supervision is usually the staff, the full time are made from 40 hours and 2 hours. This would be 38 hours and 2 hour staff meetings. The staff meets once a week with the clinicians, with the managers, and they discuss all issues, whether it's minor or major. Could be diet, could be a clinical issue, could be safety issue, could be maintenance issue in the house. So we meet once a week for 2 hours, in the management and the clinicians, and also the nursing. We have a clinical department, we have a nursing department, that they come to the house once a week to see if there's any issue arises during that week, from week to week. The structure of the house, as you have the clinical director, you have clinicians, you have director of operations, you have program directors, and you have a site managers. So the backup on call is 4 or 5 layers. If there's any issue arises at any time, it goes up the chain. It's hardly ever it goes beyond the second layer. So usually it goes to the site manager, to program director, and if there's a clinical issue, it goes immediately to the clinician to deal with it. If there's an issue with maintenance, it goes to the admin person, and from the admin person goes to the maintenance department that Bruce was talking about. If there's an IT, we have an IT department. If there's an IT or any issue with phone, computers, whatever, that goes to also to the managers, to the IT department. If there's any clinical issue, it goes immediately to the clinical managers right away. And we have everybody who's manager or clinicians have a cell phone, have a laptop, and within minutes, they respond to the site if they have to physically, or they could give direction over the phone. In terms of the what we also do when we move, we provide our phone numbers to the neighbors if there's an issue. And in the past, there was a couple issues with parking. Nothing major, nothing I've ever heard that issue with a client with the neighbors. Usually it's a parking or something to do with the grass, minor stuff like that, and we address it. We address it right away. So that's in terms of structure. In terms of the clients who's at the house, it's just to give you like a day of their life. Typically, Monday to Friday, these people will go to their day program or to work if they go to work. They usually go on Monday to Friday, 9 to 3. They come home at 3. They'll do exactly what me and you will do. They might go to the mall. They might go to the movies. They might want to take a nap. They might want to have a snack or watch a movie. And in the evening, typically, they go out on an outing of their choice. It could be an outing to Dunkin' Donut, could be to the movies, could be anything of their choice. Usually and again, generally speaking, by 8, 9 o'clock on weekdays, the house, usually these homes are quiet. On the weekend, some of them might want to go to concert, might want to go to, someplace, they, just like everybody else. And then, just to let you know, also, each person usually have an ISP. It's an individual service plan that determines, what goals they want to work on. Some of those are educational of nature. Somebody wants to, they might want to learn how to manage their money. Some people might want to learn how to administer their own medication. Some people might want to learn how to, let's say, take the bus on their own without staff if they're ready for it. So there are goals for each person that we work on with the clinicians, with the managers, and there are some just maintenance goals. Typically, people want to get up, go on social outings, and go on, and goes on like that. So, as I said, the staff are pretty well trained, and they are around the clock. The ratio depends on what the needs are, the level of the function of the clients. Sometimes there's 2 to 3 staff ratio. Sometimes there's 3 to 3. Sometimes there's 1 to 4. It really depends on the functioning of the individuals, what their needs are. And that's actually determined by us and by the state. When we get the referrals, we sit down and we talk about it, and then we'll see, we'll come to an agreement what are the needs, and then there goes, we'll draft a schedule based on those needs. I think that's, I wish I could tell you more about, but I can't really get into the specific of these, individuals. That's that.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, as I say, a couple of meetings ago, we listened to the residents, and as a response to the residents, we said that we would have ServiceNet come in and make a presentation. We requested that ServiceNet come in and make a presence to the select board. And at that point, we also asked the residents if they had any concerns or any questions to please submit them to the select board so we could, pose them to you. At this time, I'll open up for any select board comments that they may have or questions that they have of ServiceNet.
You want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. I want to ask just some generic questions. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed on this board, so let me just be very clear.
Would it make sense to have the people come up and?
Even if it's just you, that's fine. I'm not going
to. Just so that it can be picked up on the mic.
Okay.
Right.
When we look at the homes, the numbers that are out there, and so much is coming from, and the pie chart of where it's coming, the Mass Department of Health and so forth. Have you ever had an instance in the history of the company where the funding's been cut? Because we see things where, and we go through this all the time, where there's an unfunded mandate, and then all of a sudden, or there's something that's mandated, then it becomes unfunded. And if that's happened, what happens to the program, so to speak?
Since we've been in a growth mode, as you saw from the charts and from my brief discussion about the history, we've been constantly growing over the years, and we don't anticipate that slowing down. So there have been only a few. I can only think of 2, actually, situations where we actually where we actually lost the funding or discontinued a group home. And we were growing at the same time, so we had new funding for something else. We had a home for adolescents in Amherst that we didn't lose the funding. We decided that the funding was inadequate to keep the young adults that were living in that program, to give them the level of service that the state was requesting of us, that the funding was inadequate, so we decided to terminate the contract with the state. And simultaneously, Abbas's division received funding for a new group home for people with developmental disabilities. So we modified the house slightly and moved that program in. In another instance, we lost funding for a program in South Hadley, and it was a rental property, and we just discontinued the lease. So those are we've grown and changed a lot, but we rarely have actually had to close a program. Sometimes programs have morphed into a slightly different program or a larger program. But interestingly, I had a conversation with the area director for the Department of Developmental Services, which is the conduit for the funding for the Converse House that we're going to be opening in Long Meadow. And I said to her that one of the concerns, I obviously saw the media, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw some of the meeting where a lot of concerns were expressed. And she and I were talking about the fact that people had raised the concern about what if the funding for this particular program for people with brain injuries is lost? What if you bring in, sex offenders who are addicted to heroin or something? And she started laughing, and she said, this funding is never going to go. She's the one that's administering the funding for this program, and she thought it was humorous to even think that that particular funding would dry up because it's court mandated. As Bruce said, it's one of the court cases that he mentioned that has provided the funding for both of the new homes that will be opening in Long Meadow. So I think it's very highly, highly unlikely that these particular two homes will ever lose their funding in the foreseeable future. But when that has happened in the past, we have, in one case, terminated a lease, in another case, moved a different program in.
And then, because, the concerns are, and when people come to the board, they're looking for help, okay? And you mentioned that you're good neighbors, and I don't live near one of your homes, so I can't attest to it or not attest to it. But I would also imagine that if you are good neighbors, that you would have went to the neighborhood prior to putting the home in and said, here's what we plan on doing. We want to have a meeting to allay your fears and so forth. So understand that I have a little jaundiced opinion when people talk about being good neighbors. I mean, we're going to have another presentation later on today where someone's probably going to come in and say they're a great neighbor into the town and here's why we should do things with them. So so to me, that's one thing that was missing. Step one wasn't talking to the neighbors and first.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
It's actually against the law. We used to do that. We love to do that, actually. And it used to be actually built into the regulations back in the day when I started, when we were opening group homes for people with mental illness, and it was funded by the Department of Mental Health. There were a couple of pages of regulations that we had to follow, that we wanted to follow, actually, but we were required also by the State Department of Mental Health. And there were step 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And one of the early steps and stages in opening a group home involved abutters. It involved going to individual abutters, knocking on the door and saying we're coming into the neighborhood, and if they're willing to welcome us into their home, we would sit and chat and so on. We'd have coffee meetings, and we would have group meetings. And then the lawyers for the state of Massachusetts were challenged on that by some person, I'm not sure who, exactly what happened, but the regulation was changed, and we were told by the state attorneys that we were to cease and desist any such activity because it breaks the law, and it's just the same. We were told that it was the same as, it would be the same thing as though if someone had heart disease or kidney disease or on dialysis or something, they were moving next door, that the neighbor would go and tell everybody in the community, this person's on dialysis, hey, we're moving into the neighborhood and we have this disability. And it actually violates HIPAA, and I don't know what other laws, I'm not a lawyer, but we're not allowed to do that anymore, so, And it was, I have to say, it was a mixed bag. I've been through I've been through that, and I've been through phase 2 where we're not allowed to do that anymore, and it didn't always help. It sometimes actually hurt, and I've done a lot of reading on the literature and opening group homes, as you would imagine. I know a lot more than I ever thought I would about this particular topic, both from personal experience and from reading the literature on it and the experiences of other people and research that's been done on it. And in some instances, having a lot of conversations with a lot of people prior to opening a group home actually makes things worse because it raises people's anxiety. Maybe a question that this neighbor didn't think of, the other one thought of, and this other neighbor says, oh my God, I didn't think of that particular possible problem or something that could happen.
But you're able to come here, though, without breaking the law, because...
It's a fine line. We're not allowed to talk about the individuals.
I don't think anybody here wants to talk about the individuals in their home. I don't think we've ever talked about that as individuals.
What we used to do in the old days of the going to neighbors and announcing that we were coming in was, we still didn't talk about details of individual people, but we told what category of disability, and somehow it came to our attention that people already knew that people with brain injuries were coming into these homes. So maybe, if anybody sued us because we talked about the fact that these people had brain injuries, we could say, well, they already knew that it was already on TV, and so if that had not come out, and I don't know exactly how that became known, but if that had not been known, I would be pretty reticent to say what disability people had or anything about the individuals.
Okay.
So,
but to get back, and you already mentioned it, that, ServiceNet is a for-profit corporation.
no,
and-
it's not. It's a not-for-profit.
Not-for-profit, but you do make profit.
No,
Otherwise-
absolutely.
So you make losses?
The last
you
few
operate
years,
losses?
actually, we had losses at the end of the year. We sometimes have a little surplus, and sometimes we have a deficit. We're not, we don't have.
Okay, so and actually that heightens my concern, that because if a program isn't sustained, or, because you mentioned that, you had an operation that wasn't paying enough to cover, or for the services that the state wanted, and you mentioned that you can change what goes into a group home, and I understand what you said, the person from Massachusetts found it humorous, and I don't find anything that the government says is humorous in terms of when it comes to money. But obviously, again, the concerns of the community and the neighbors is that you can change the service in the facility.
The reason that we haven't been that we haven't broken even financially for the last couple of years is because we sustain programs even when they lose money. And one advantage to having become larger and more diverse is that if a particular homeless shelter is losing money and another program has a slight surplus, they kind of balance each other out. So we've been in the actually better position, more stable position of not having to close programs when they lose money. We can hang in for a couple of years, and the tides sometimes turn, and these things go in trends. We used to have certain programs that made money and other ones lost money, and then one day we look at the numbers and it's reversed because the funding for one thing has increased and the others have decreased. So we've been pretty stable over the years, and as I said, I've been at the organization for 34 years, and off the top, there may be others that I'm not thinking of, but we've only closed a couple of programs, and we have opened many, as you saw from the, I would not be overly concerned that one group home would close. The other thing I would say is that we're extremely sensitive to the appropriateness of certain neighborhoods, and as Abbas could probably go into a lot more detail on this, but we think really carefully when we're going to be looking for a property, whether it's to purchase or to rent, where the property is located, what the clientele is that's going to be living in that particular group home, and we've been pretty much on the money with opening homes in the right places. If someone is going to be making noise, let's say, which is not unusual for somebody with a serious developmental disability to maybe yell once in a while or not talk in a quiet voice when they have certain needs. So if there's a group with that particular issue, we will put that house on a 1 acre situation in the woods. We won't put somebody like that in a house that's right next door to a neighbor. And so if we were, and it's I have to say, an extremely slim possibility that either of these two homes are going to have their funding cut anytime in the foreseeable future, but if something should come to pass like that, we certainly aren't going to put inappropriate people that would not fit into a certain neighborhood in that neighborhood just because we happen to have a house. As Bruce said, we have 85, we have a very large number of homes throughout western Massachusetts. We're not going to be between a rock and a hard place where we have just this one house and we have this one particular client that needs a home and that's the only solution for that particular person. And if we weren't sensitive to the needs of the community, you would have heard about ServiceNet. We'd be all over the media. People would be suing us. There would be all kinds of upset people in the community. You don't hear about that because we try to stay we try to stay in the news for positive things, let's put it that way, not negative things.
Okay.
Anybody else? Alex?
Go ahead. Thank you for coming, Mr. Stubbs. I just have a question about because the issues that come before us have had to do with ownership and zoning and things. What's your relationship with the home, the firm that owns the home, and in terms of responsibilities for maintaining the home? I see this as a absentee landlord
No, not at all.
approach. Well, how would you allay my
Not at all.
concerns?
I'll tell you a story. It's not in Long Meadow, it's a different community. As Bruce said, we own some of our group homes and some we rent. And the reason we have that balance is mainly financial. It has to do with whether or not we have resources, whether the bank will finance a purchase at a particular time. And because we have, as I said, not been making huge profits in the last few years, we have, in some instances recently, found investors or real estate investors who want to buy a house and lease it back to us. I'll tell you a little story about a friend of mine who I approached because he owns a lot of properties in Hampshire County, mostly in Hampshire County, and I approached him and I said, would you be interested in buying a home and renting it to ServiceNet? And he wanted to know what it would involve, and we went through a lot of discussion about it, and he said he was a little worried that that the home would have more than the usual wear and tear on it, and that he would be called in the middle of the night to fix things. And I said, no, I said, usually the kind of arrangement we make with landlords is that we take care of almost everything. And it's been about 6 years since he owned that property. And I asked him about it recently, and he said, I forget I own that property because you take care of absolutely everything. And he goes to see it every once in a while, and he said it's the best kept property of all his properties. He rents to students sometimes in Hampshire County, and the home that we take care of is one of the best kept homes that he has. We generally make arrangements. Actually, Bruce could talk to this more than I could, but generally the leases that we have with our owners, we take most of the responsibility. We have a crew, maintenance crew led by a licensed contractor, as Bruce said, and we take responsibility for the day-to-day maintenance, and the landlords generally are only responsible for major repairs. Bruce, why don't you come up and...
What you said is entirely accurate.
All right, okay. So the homes that are owned versus that we own versus the ones that we lease are equally well kept. I just recently took somebody that I recently met who wanted to take a tour of some ServiceNet homes. I took him to three of our group homes. Again, not the one in Long Meadow, but as he left the first one, he said, "Wow, that doesn't look like a group home. I'm totally blown away," or something like that. And then I took him to another one, and he said, "Are they all like this?" And he commented after seeing three that they look better than the homes in his neighborhood and better than the home that he lives in. Our homes are very well kept. I guess we could offer to take people on a tour if some people wanted to see a couple of, some of
If I can just follow up that question. I thank you for your answer. Again, the concern is that the town, should there be an issue, our only legal recourse is with an owner rather than the person renting the houses, and we do have rental properties in Long Meadow that have been particular issues. But the other thing I guess I'm a little bit would like to just hear a little bit about is more about the relationship you have with the with the maintenance of the building and the facility and long-term care. For example, you talked about the sensitivity to the neighborhood, and yet the contractor came in, and we've had numerous complaints about work well after 11 p.m., which violates our zoning bylaws. We've had numerous complaints about cars parked all over the lawns, all over the place. And one would have thought that if you come in and been quietly rehabbing the house, it would have pardon the expression, flown under the radar. But it was kind of an in-your-face, look what we're doing here at midnight with saws going and hammers pounding and the windows open and cars parked literally all over the lawns, which they were today. And so I guess the question is, how do you justify that relative to, we're trying to be sensitive to the neighborhood?
I'm sorry about that. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Before we leave tonight, well, you all have my business card. It has my cell phone number on it. And before we leave tonight, Abbas will give you his cell phone number. Bruce can give you his card. The minute anything is disturbing anyone, we want to know about it. We are responsible for that. It doesn't matter whether we own the home or not. You're completely free to call us, and we have a very close relationship with the owner. And if anybody's being disturbed night or day, call me, wake me up. We'll stop it immediately. Bruce, do you want to say anything else about that? Did you know about this?
After the fact.
You found out? Okay. Well, yeah, I'm sorry.
We have the numbers, but it wasn't once or twice. There were many, I don't know what the numbers are, Stephen, but 6 or 8 or whatever it is we were reading in our notes about calls of late night.
Yeah, I can't, I can't
Thank you.
really answer that because I don't know who it was, and I don't know whether it was a subcontractor, and I don't know whether it was somebody from our There's
Oh,
been
I'm
some of
sure it
our
was a
workmen
subcontractor.
involved, and there's also the owner has hired some. It's a collaborative effort between him and our people. So I have no idea if it's our people, his people, but we'll certainly look into it and
Thank you.
put a stop to it.
Thanks.
Alex?
I just had a sort of specific factual question. First of all, waste disposal. Can you comment, I mean, this is something that people have asked, I'm asking because the residents are asking. What types of waste and how would it be disposed and where would it,
We would
where would it
dispose
be
of waste
stored?
the same as any family would. That's all I can say.
There's no garage.
Pardon?
There's no garage. You took the garage out.
Thomas, do you know anything about window waste?
They design a specific place where the garbage is going to be. And so it's
Outside?
There's a door on the front of the garage.
Yes.
Behind that door is an area to keep the trash cans.
So they kept the.
There's a door on what used to be the front of the garage.
So, no, I'm sorry, so is the response that it's going to be kept inside?
I guess so. I don't know that you've ever.
You're asking where the garbage cans will be stored, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And,
Behind, what used to be the garage, which we now have made into a bedroom or two, the front of
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is part of the structure, there's a wall and a door. Behind that door is a outdoor closet shed, whatever you want to call it.
Can I stop us just 1 minute, please? The audience, you're going to have to kind of go along with us. This answering period is between the Select Board and ServiceNet, and we can't allow the interaction, please. Go ahead. Alex?
okay. Now, Ms. Stubbs, you indicated that, or, I'm sorry, maybe it's Mr. Hamdan indicated that for each person, the placement would be a decision between you and the state, is that right?
Correct. Well, the state, it's a closed referral system. We don't directly take referrals. If you had a relative with a brain injury, you couldn't call him up and say, can that person come into this group home? The state funds us. They qualify us to take people that they deem to be eligible through their eligibility process. It's a whole elaborate process. And they send the referrals to us. In rare cases, if we felt for some reason that that person would not fit in with the rest of the residents or would not be appropriate to that particular staffing pattern, we have on rare occasions disagreed with them, but usually they know that they visit these homes too, and they fund them, they know what the staffing pattern, the staffing ratio is, so they would refer people that were appropriate to that particular grouping.
So, just to use a specific example, this place on Red Fern Drive, would the resident, could the resident say, I want to go to Red Fern Drive? I mean, would,
They could say that. They probably wouldn't. I mean, the state is moving more in that direction, by the way, with.
I know, I guess I'm just trying to
Person
figure out
having- persons
who
having
gets
more
this,
choices.
who decides where they get to go? I mean, does,
Basically, the state
Okay.
people that fund us. Although it is moving, there's some initiatives going on where there've been some family members of people with disabilities who have complained that their families don't have any choices about where these people go, and they have to go to that agency or the other, and they wanted to be able to shop around and pick the organization that they thought was the best for their loved one. So there's some possibility that will loosen up a little bit, but for right now, the people coming to these two homes will be referred by the state.
okay. And when somebody is removed from either of these homes, whose decision is that?
It's a joint decision. It rarely happens.
The joint between?
Between us and the state.
Okay.
I mean, we do have this language in our contracts that say we can give the state a certain number of days' notice if we want to not discharge someone. It rarely happens.
Does the resident say, I'd rather live in Converse instead of Redfern, or I want to live in Westfield? Does that have anything to do with it?
No, I mean, no. For all practical purposes, no.
Okay. And could you just describe for us, because we've had a lot of discussion about the Dover Amendment, could you just describe as completely as you can what is educational about the program at Redfern Drive?
My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, and I know you are.
No, I'm not asking you for an interpretation. I'm just saying factual.
Well-
Whatever you consider to be educational.
My understanding is that under the Dover Amendment, group homes are a priori a subcategory of educational use, that they are an allowed use under the law, and that they also are covered under the Fair Housing Amendments Act, where the Fair Housing law of the country was amended to include people with disabilities. So my understanding from my reading and my coaching from various attorneys, mostly Tom Miranda over the years, and going to workshops in this category, there's a guy named Ken Margolin who's the biggest expert in the state on the Dover and other situations with group homes. But my understanding is that that asking a group home, a group of people, or an agency that's opening a group home for a group of people with disabilities to go through any hoops that are different from the general public, it would be the same thing as you saying you can't move in here because you're African American or some other category. That's my understanding of the law.
Okay.
There is a lot of education going on, but I think it's rather incidental to the conversation. My understanding is that it's not relevant to the conversation, that if we were opening a group home for people who had an IQ so low that they couldn't learn anything, if it was a group of very, very severely disabled, developmentally disabled people, that they still have the right to live in the community amongst regular people.
I'm sorry, you were saying it was incidental to what?
To the conversation about whether we have the right to be there or not be there, whether or not
Okay.
we're going to be educating people. The fact is that in this particular instances, practically all we do is education. But my understanding of the law is that that's incidental to whether or not we have the right to be there, that we don't have to demonstrate or prove that we are doing education in order to be considered educational use, because group homes are educational use. They're a category. My understanding is, from my reading and from...
Okay, and again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot of the legal. I
Yeah.
just want to know what the facts are
Well, we are doing,
about this particular group home.
As
One of-
Abbas mentioned, everyone's there for educational purposes. The reason why this lawsuit was waged by family members of people who were in nursing homes who had brain injuries is because in the nursing homes they were just vegetating. They weren't learning anything, and they weren't being rehabilitated. And there's a lot of evidence, new evidence coming out every day that the brain regenerates years later. We used to think that only in the first 6 months after a stroke or an accident or a brain injury, people would recover use, and now we're learning that even 10 years later, people can learn things that they lost the ability to do. So, as Abbas said, everyone has an individual service plan, and in there are their educational goals. And one of the main purposes of the staff, of having so many staff around in these homes, is to coach people and teach them the skills that they lost. And in some cases, we have people with brain injuries who used to be an engineer or a doctor or a very high-functioning professional, and they can't remember what they had for breakfast, but they could still read the New York Times. So the brain is a very strange organ, and you can lose function in part of it and still have it in the other. And our goal is to help these people regain as much of their functioning as they possibly can through education.
So, well, yeah, actually, do you want to come up and so we can hear you?
Like, in some cases where we helped at least 3-4 people to obtain their GED. That was their goal, for the year. In some other instances, we have one person who wants to learn how to surf the internet, to use a computer.
You could just sit it.
I'm sorry. And then he was able to do that within 3 to 4 months when he came to our day center. That was purely educational. There's people, they want to, learn how to research, certain topics. The staff would sit with them. So it's really goals that they choose, in the beginning, as I said, on an annual basis, and then it could be from, actually most people, I would say, there's a goal always when it comes to money management, how to balance a checkbook, because they forgot, because of their injury, how to balance a checkbook, how to, budget, So that's usually, actually, I would say, in probably at least 80% of the cases we have, that's a goal usually there. There's a goal also how to administer their medication, how to understand the side effects of the medications, how to order their medications, how to call the doctors, because they forget all that. It's almost like you're teaching somebody from scratch how to do all that. So there's a lot of, that kind of nature, of goals.
Let me add one thing, too. And you correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, that you have been certified by the state to operate these homes. So there's a pre-certification that what you're doing is educational based. This is not something that you have to defend the law or anything.
My understanding is no.
It's
My understanding is-
predisposed that you're licensed by the state to operate these homes.
Yes.
And they're under state control, so that issue has been resolved.
Actually, no, there's not a single case that's been decided that said somebody was pre-certified and was automatically
I
given.
didn't say pre-certified, I said this firm is in business with the state to operate group homes.
Yeah,
Right.
we are reviewed by our funding agencies, and we have either licenses or certification, depending on which funding source. There's different kinds of stamps of approval that the state gives us.
No,
for
I
different
understand,
cities.
and just to be clear, I'm taking everything that you're saying at face value. I don't know whether ServiceNet is good or bad personally. I'm assuming it does exactly what you're telling us that it's gonna do. I guess my question is, because this is something that Mr. Hamdan mentioned, you were talking about the individual service program, and you said some of it was educational. And you talked a lot about clinical, the clinical side of it. And then I also, in one of the things that I was looking at was the job description, as you guys posted it, for the program director. And I didn't really see anything about education in there.
The program director is not engaged in the education with the clients. A program director's role is to train and supervise the other staff, whose role is to engage with the
And is that the name
individuals.
of is that the residential counselor?
Yeah.
Yes.
And but
Okay,
those-
I didn't see anything.
Those job descriptions are very generic. We have 3 unions in our shop.
Yeah.
So these are generic job descriptions that apply whether it's a homeless shelter or anything else. And then if you notice, most of the job descriptions at the end, it says, or anything else as assigned by the supervisor. And those are the specific things that relate to individual programs. In a homeless shelter or in different settings, the job descriptions do vary, but we kind of use the generic job descriptions.
Could you tell us about the clinical side of what happens at these group homes? Because you were talking a lot about.
Okay, so as I said, you have an ISP, and the ISP, there are the goals for the person, right? So it's the job of the clinicians to write the plan, how those goals can be achieved. So it will be a goal and will be a measurable objective. So let's say, for example, somebody wants to lose 30 pounds, right? So that's the goal. The measurable objective is, okay, how are we going to get there? So this person will, let's say, will go 3 times to the gym. Will probably be on a diet. This is a kind of diet, the kind of food, calories intake, whatever. So it's the clinical person would write the plan and would write the intervention for the program director and the staff to implement. And then they follow up on a weekly basis. We collect data and all that, and then to see whether is it working, not working, where we have to tweak it. So that's the involvement of the clinical, department.
And how much of this individual service program would you call educational, and how much of it would you call it clinical?
Well, it depends on the person. It depends on each person. So, as I said earlier, if let's say that the person's main goal is to achieve, obtain GED or high school. We have people actually who are attending college classes, So if that's their main goal, that becomes, the main, objective of the staff and the clinical department. Sometimes the family, the guardians, are pushing an objective that they want this person, to learn whatever, So that becomes, so it's really specific to the wish and of the person and the family and the guardians, So it really depends.
So to use the example of somebody who's earning their GED. I think
GED.
is- How much of that is taking place in the group home?
How many people in?
No, how much of the pursuing of the GED is occurring in the group home?
It really depends. In terms of time-wise, it's with, it's.
I mean, are they taking classes in the group home?
No, they'll be coached. They'll be, they'll be coached, they'll be taken to the classes. They'll be, they'll be driving their,
Okay.
motivation and
So
convincing.
somebody who's in the GED program, that would be somewhere else?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Sometimes also education, where somebody wants to apply for a job, wants to get a job. So we take them through the step, to get a newspaper, to write a resume, to go for an interview, so all these, steps.
Now, you talked about a day program. one of the things that was on your website was a brain injury social recreation program.
That program just recently closed.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
heard that,
Yeah,
which was surprising to me considering that it's still on your website.
yeah, we have to take it down. I just told the
yeah.
the
But,
PR
but
person.
what is the day program that you're talking about right now then?
Okay, so that one was closed, was social of nature, social activity. The one we have right now is where people go usually Monday to Friday, 9 to 3, and, learn on developing their skills. Could be sometimes muscle strengthening, OT, PT, sometimes, could be community integrations, community, going out in the community. The person
Community, could you, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
where people wants to go back, do activities in the community. Like, for instance, we have people who likes to go fishing, but they're not physically capable yet. So we work on strengthening their muscles, to be able to do that. So we had one person whose goal was to take 50 steps within a year. Actually, he took those 50 steps within 3 months. He couldn't. When he came to us, he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't even lift his head, So that was his goal. And actually, that one of the most successful stories for that day center. So it really depends also on the person, what their goals are.
Now, the day program, who staffs that?
What do you mean, who's staff?
Well, I mean, they go,
We have a program director who's master level. Actually, she has 25 years experience with brain injury, and she has manager under her, and she has a staff who she oversees directly during the day.
Are there any classes there?
There's a lot of classes goes on. Yes.
And
Yeah.
we're a
What-
training site also for 2 of the local colleges training their
Yeah.
physical therapy students, because there's a lot, we do physical therapy there. We have a whole room,
Yeah.
rehab room. and
I'm
we
sorry,
teach-
so a minute, you're having I think you've referred to them as consumer service recipients and clients. So is it the clients that are doing the physical therapy, or they're being given the physical therapy? You said physical
understand.
therapy
Yeah.
in a training program. I'm trying to figure out who's training
yeah.
whom.
We're a training site for, the Elms has a physical therapy
Yeah.
track
Yeah.
at their place.
Yep.
They are sending students to our site, to the day program, like a practicum, an internship, to learn how to do physical therapy, because we have physical therapists who are doing physical therapy with the clients.
So they're like, I'm not trying to put this in pejorative, practicing on your client? I mean, they're
No,
learning.
It's a learning environment. It's
No, I
like-
understand that.
It's like an internship for a medical student.
Right,
Going to
right.
a hospital and doing an internship at the
But,
hospital.
I mean, your clients aren't learning to do physical
No.
therapy?
No.
Okay, that's what I was trying to.
No, they're receiving physical therapy.
Receiving
physical
physical-
therapy.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else educational about this group home that you haven't talked about?
I mean, if I have, I mean, as I said, usually it's what I mentioned, it really depends on, I mean, I can't really sit down and remember like everybody has 5, 6 goals usually a year. So if you take 5, 6 times 200 something, I'm sure we'll come up with 1,000 goals. I don't know how many of these are, education. I'm sure I could pick at least, if I have the data in front of me, I can pick at least maybe 200 out of those.
I visit frequently at the staff meetings at the various group homes throughout Western Mass. And when I sit in on a staff meeting, I would have to say that probably 90% of what the staff is discussing have to do with educational goals of the individuals that are living in the group homes. However, I would still maintain that that is not particularly pertinent to this conversation, because we have 2 group homes in Belchertown for people who cannot speak and cannot learn anything, and they never will. One person has only a little piece of his brain left and basically cannot ever hope to learn anything. And we have nursing staff available, and people are just cared for. And those group homes are allowable, were allowable, and are allowable under the law because they're group homes, not because we're doing education in those particular homes. 90% of the homes are not like that. Our specialty is not severely disabled people. We inherited those homes through one of our mergers with an organization that did specialize more in severely disabled people, but severely disabled people who can't learn are still entitled to live in communities in group homes that are allowed under law as residential use, as a subcategory of educational use, even if they can't learn anything. That's the point I'm trying to get across.
No, I understand. Just one last question. So you were talking about educational purposes. Would the learning to walk 50 steps in a year, would that be an educational purpose, in your view?
Not in the most strict sense, but yeah, for that person, could be. The person could need to learn how to walk again because they forgot. It could be that they're physically disabled and that's why they can't walk.
But that could be also first step into another, goal. So if let's say a person who couldn't lift his head in a wheelchair couldn't go on the computer, you couldn't go from step 1 to 5, one shot. So step 1, strengthen the muscles. The next step is, to motivate that person. Step 3, maybe to get into the computer, So it really, you have to take the first step to go to the, where the ultimate goal is. I do have to say also, when we go through licensing, it's usually the bottom line is, for these people to gain skills in whatever area that they're working on. It's our goal not to do the work for them. It's just to make sure that, they do as much as they can on their own and to push them, to that limit that they could learn more, whether it's in the cooking, whether it's in the money management, whether it's in medication administration, whether even going out, on their own, it's safely. So it's our job is to push, that person, to not to take this, accept the status quo, and that's where ServiceNet sometimes differ from other agency, where we don't accept the notion that this person reached their potential, and there's no room for improvement. So we push these people.
We've actually taught people to read who were told when they were in first grade that they would never learn to read because they were mentally retarded. And we've seen that. We've seen people actually learn to read that were told they never could because we pushed them and we taught them.
I've personally heard at least 50 stories where I heard it from the case manager from the state, from the family, and from the guardians, that this person could never do this, could never do that. And we proved them wrong many times, that's not the case. It's very hard for a human being to
I'd like to get a question, and I think Alex is wound down on his question. It is state regulated.
Yes.
And how often normally are the homes visited by state?
It depends on how you do on the previous one. So usually the most is 2 years. If let's say, it's kind of a little complicated. If let's say you score certain score, and in some areas they might come back and do kind of like a brief review in a year. I believe, we scored 94% on the last one, and so we had the license for 2 years, which is the most you can get.
Okay, thank you. Sue, I appreciate you coming before the board, and I realize that this is something that your agency does not do, and you normally have town meetings, but I do appreciate you coming in and all the staff preparation time that you put into this to brief our residents, because we are being filmed, we're being broadcast to the community. And I have no more questions. Does anybody on the board have a simple question they'd like to ask ServiceNet Break? So thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
We sincerely appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.
Let's see, we've got Eastham Lane, Stephen?
We're on that now. So in the packets are a red line, or I guess mine's blue line, but a red line version of the license agreement we had presented some time ago. If a town council wouldn't mind hanging in there for another second. There were some concerns raised about how these walls would be treated if the property changed hands, and we made some adjustments to the license agreement to reflect those concerns, and hopefully that the recommended changes will meet with the board's approval. And I do want to say, after the discussion last week about the appearance of the walls, I know that I never really paid attention to how many of these things there are in town here, but there are a lot of these monuments, or whatever you want to call them, on town roads, including my own. So, I don't know how all of those are licensed or how those are, because many of them appear to be in the right of way. But it was just interesting to me that after our discussion was illustrative for me because I paid a lot more attention to it, so.
I know you had some correspondence with Alex this week on the red line copy that you had. I
No,
thought there was.
no,
I just emailed you.
Oh, just email me, okay, excuse me, okay. Has the board had enough time to review this subject for us to put this forth as a motion?
I'll move that we approve this license agreement for the, I guess they're the walls along corner Eastham Lane and William Street as presented for this evening.
Do we have a second? I'll second for discussion. Discussion?
My only point is that the walls weren't approved prior to going up, and I still have as I said, we've gone to court over people doing things like this, and I don't know how they got approved in the planning process without going to the board for a structure on town land, but it's just bad practice.
They were not in, right now, they do not exist on town land.
Will the vote make it town land?
No, the acceptance of the street.
Is when the street,
Come on up, Dave, so they can hear you out in TV land.
lucky them. When the town accepts the road, if the town accepts the road as a public way, the fee ownership of the land stays with the owners on either side of the street. But that ownership is subject to the rights of the public to use the way. And the select board controls the use of the way. So that's why the license is structured so that if and when it becomes a public way, then the license kicks in, because it will be on the town way.
Okay, so my question, I know this vote might not make it a town street, but it's gonna go to town meeting to be accepted then.
Correct.
When it's accepted at town meeting, it becomes a town street, town property, and,
It's not town property. I mean, you have to, in Long Meadow doesn't own the streets. They don't take the streets. They don't get a deed so that the title of the street is in the town. Title remains with the abutting property owners, but subject to that
All right, well,
overriding right of the
Let me go backwards and
public.
rephrase my question. The town does control the tree belt,
Correct.
okay.
Because it's part of the public way.
Right, so I'll forget about owning the street. We're gonna accept the street, we own the tree belts. The tree belts are under the jurisdiction of the board, that's my point. We're approving something that didn't come before. And again, I'm not gonna go over what we talked about at the meeting, I'm just.
Certainly,
not gonna support it.
I mean, I don't want to say it would have been preferable that the developer say, we're putting these walls here, and our ultimate hope is that this is going to be accepted as a public way, and if it is, the walls are going to be under the control of the selectmen, and they're going to have to do business with you.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
The thing that I noticed was under paragraphs or section 7, says the license is personal in nature and is not intended to be a conveyance of a property interest and does not run with the land. The way I interpret that is that if somebody buys the property at 60 Eastham Lane from the current owner, then we don't have an agreement with that new owner. Am I reading that right, or is that?
Well, no, the license, you're granting the license
To a particular person.
so that those walls can remain there.
Right.
And it's for the concept, it's a license, you can terminate at any time. I mean, that's by definition what a license is. It's terminable at the will of the grantor. And if you weren't happy with what's going on down there, whoever happens to be living there at the time knows that he or she runs the risk of the town saying, we don't like this anymore.
I guess what I was getting at is whatever obligations, I mean, things that we're doing for the licensee and the things that the licensee
Right.
is obligated to do.
Yeah.
So the things that the licensee is obligated to do, that would not survive a sale because it's personal in nature and does not run with the land. So for example, section 5 where it says licensee agrees to maintain a full force public liability insurance. That's with the particular person that we've got this agreement with. That new owner wouldn't have that same
Well,
obligation.
we're going to record it so that it's noticed to the world and future owners at that.
Right, but the
licensing
notice, but then somebody reading it will say, oh, great, it doesn't run with the land, it's personal in nature. I mean, recording it is, as you say, just a notice provision. So if what you're putting on notice is something that says it's personal and does not run with the land, I'm not sure how that improves the situation.
I mean, if the licensee, a future licensee, doesn't do what the license.
Well, it's not a future license, I mean, he's not even, I mean, the owner isn't even a licensee, I mean, they're just the owner of that property.
Well, if down the line, those tasks aren't performed by whoever happens to be there, the town can terminate the license. I mean, I think that's the leverage.
Okay. So, I mean, what would be the disadvantage of changing it and saying that it does run with the land?
I'm concerned about elevating that license to something that's more in the nature of an easement, that might have more of an element of permanence to it.
So that would elevate the owner of that property over this area that's going to be in the public way.
Yes.
Okay, I get it.
Any more discussion? We had a motion up and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay.
So 3-1.
3-1.
Mr. Santinello.
Mr. Santinello opposed.
Ms. Angelides.
She's not here.
Absent. Okay.
She was absent.
Excuse me, I just want to make a comment before I leave. I think you did a big disservice to the residents of Redford Valley.
Excuse me, is the board supposed to be taking comments from?
No, they aren't.
Thank you.
No, they aren't. Let's see, the next item on it, let's skip the one item and jump up onto the presentation for the Long Meadow Shops.
I wrote a presentation on my iPad.
Yeah, we can turn, the remote is sitting right over on top of that laptop. You just hit the power button.
You want to help him, he's got an iPad, you want to help him set it up?
I don't know how to do the
Oh.
Apple TV.
Yeah.
You're the expert on that.
Yeah.
New business now?
Yes, this is Long Meadow Shop.
Cool.
While we're setting this up, maybe we can get one of these other pieces of business. You want to, Paul, you want to go ahead and do the elections? The warrant appointments for Democrat, Republican,
Yeah, but I gotta, okay, I'll move to.
Well, no, you're gonna take over while he's setting this up.
Okay, oh, you're busy, okay.
Yeah.
Next on the agenda is election workers appointments. They're for the Democrats, Republicans, and on the roll. These were submitted by our town clerk for our approval. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I think we have to do these separately, don't we, Paul? So I'll move we accept the election worker nominations as submitted by our town clerk for the, from the Democratic Party.
Second it?
Oh, second.
There you go. Any discussion?
No.
No? All in favor?
Mr. Foster, are you voting for this? This is for the Democratic, thank you. And I'll move we approve the nominations for election worker appointments as submitted by our town clerk for the Republican Party.
Second for discussion.
Okay, any discussion?
Yeah. What are y'all's understanding of our review? I mean, are we approving these people because we think they're going to do a good job, Are we bound to accept them because they're being put forth by the two political parties? How do you guys view them?
You are approving the two parties in town, and the unenrolls are actually provided by the town clerk.
Right.
The two parties submit people that they solicit to work the polls.
Right.
So you are approving what has been submitted by each particular chair of the party. And they've actually signed their letter of submission.
Right.
Right. That's what you're voting on.
No, I get that, but.
It doesn't attest to any, now, I know in the past, the town clerk has not recommended people and not forwarded
Right,
names
right.
to the board because there were some issues and, that type of thing.
Issues relating to
Yeah.
suitability?
Yeah, whatever, they didn't perform the task and the clerk
Right.
would recommend to us that here's the list that I want approved. Now, that doesn't mean they all work. My understanding is that's a list to draw from for the polls.
That's what I understand.
Okay.
The question is, if we don't want somebody on there, can we vote against it? I suspect we could.
I suspect we could. And
We could. The point is, though, we need election workers, and our bylaws require that they be equally appointed from each party, and therefore, to
Right.
get an equal appointment from each party, we ask each party plus unenrolled to nominate some election workers. So,
And you're receiving this now for the September primary.
Right.
So the question is the timing of it, because my concern would be with the list submitted by the Republican chair, without getting into any personal issues with a particular party, that I have a concern with one, and I'm not sure if either board member. And does it have to be done tonight, or can we wait till the next meeting?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. That's a Kathy Ingram question. I'll shoot her a message and see if there's a deadline on this, if you bear with me.
Okay.
Perhaps by the time they get done with their.
Can we table
So
this?
let's table this one, and let's go to
Okay.
the
So,
unenrolled.
okay, do we need a motion to
Yep.
formally table this? I'll move we.
We can table, sure, and then we'll go to
Wait.
subcommittee reports.
Yeah, only table it temporarily until
That's what tabling is. We're gonna table
Okay.
I would ask that we table the approval of the Republican nominated
Okay.
slate. Okay?
Okay.
And therefore, I'll make a motion that we approve the
Tabling.
slate of election worker appointments as submitted by our town clerk for unenrolled voters.
Any second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All right.
All right.
Okay, next on the agenda is a subcommittee report, since we're the only one that met. Mr. Gold, would you
Not
like
true.
to give, you already had a meeting?
We
Okay, so
had a
we'll
meeting.
get subcommittee
No, no,
reports.
We're just bouncing down to,
No, for the unenrolled workers, did he?
He didn't
put-
vote.
you didn't vote.
He's
So
abstaining.
3-0
He's abstaining,
okay, thank
301.
you.
He's inoccupied. Okay, so do you want to give a report of the operations subcommittee, if you have one?
Sure. Marie and I met on July 17th, and that was our first meeting. It was our first chance. I mean, we really just discussed what the operations subcommittee would be trying to accomplish, and we took it as sort of our first goal was to review bylaws. I think that was on the agenda of the subcommittee meeting. And so we discussed that, and in particular, so I believe that's going to be one of our goals, something that we're going to be looking at, having to do with registration of rentals, looking at possible bylaw changes, and some of the issues that have been raised with hot bedding and that kind of thing. And then we looked at other potential projects, such as working with the school committee to decrease electrical use. One of the other things that we considered looking at was programs to decrease water use by the town, working with the recycling commission to increase recycling. And there was some discussion about an informal charter review, but there was no consensus on any of those items except the decrease of electrical use and the bylaws changes.
I apologize for that. I thought the meetings were this week, that's why I said.
Oh,
I saw the
yeah.
postings.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark? You want to give
Oh.
a report for the finance subcommittee?
Sure, let me just pull up,
And I'll have Rich do the IT report when we're done.
yeah. Yeah.
No, like-
No, Paul and I met as a subcommittee for the finance subcommittee, and we spoke about some of the options. I was trying to pull up my minutes from the meeting. I haven't found those, Paul, so you may have to,
Okay.
here we go. Might as well read what we put down here. So we discussed the development of 5-year budget overview to include a couple of years past and the current year and maybe a couple of years in the future, and using the most broadest of guidelines so we can track some of the areas of where the budget might be. So we were going to arrange our next meeting to include our Chief Financial Officer, Town Manager, to talk about what it would take to look at the presentation format that the Select Board gets for the budget, to include the things that we talked about last year that we wanted in next year's budget. So that was a good part of it, of what we talked about. And also to look at some of the personnel budget guidelines of whether that, as we in the school committee are going toward contract negotiations. Ours are in place, but how do we best communicate to the school committee what the town's looking for budget guidelines in terms of having them integrated potentially into their longer-term budgets. So the real discussion was talking about budget formatting for the select board, and also looking at preparing kind of the modifications to the budget is prepared for the select board that we talked about last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can I, on the thing about the collective bargaining, I will sit on the negotiating teams
So,
with the school contracts.
Not to collective bargain in public, which we don't do, but if you recall that the select board had many meetings, both before you got here and while you got here, Stephen, talking about guidelines for collective bargaining, on and on and on and on, so that when you and the groups went into collective bargaining, you understood the parameters of the select board, and we were hoping that we would either have a similar discussion, or you would take those guidelines to the school committee as part of theirs, so that we all understood we were working with the same kinds of guidelines.
Guidelines for contracts?
For contracts, right.
Yeah, I don't
Financial
know.
guidelines, which is what our concern.
I don't know how that'll play out.
Oh, I understand
But
that,
we will be in the room.
Right, okay.
As a part of it.
No, I understand.
Can I also, on the tabling of the election workers before he gets started?
Yep.
The deadline is August 15th, so you don't have to do it tonight, but you have to do it at the next meeting, otherwise you'll need a special meeting, because there's no meeting between that one and the 15th. Do you want me, I'm not gonna be here for the next meeting. Do you want Kathy, Paul Pasterzik will be here. Do you want the clerk to attend to answer questions on this?
I don't think it's necessarily of attendance, and I think it's something we could potentially talk offline about one of the submissions.
Okay. Do you want to email me some questions, and I can go over with Kathy and get you an answer?
If you guys don't mind that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
On that subject, you made a motion to table the Republican one?
Right.
No?
We don't have to, yes, we did, and we don't have to take it off the table until the next meeting.
No, but you guys made a motion, who seconded it?
Who seconded the motion for tabling?
I don't think we did. I'll
No.
second it at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, so you bring me up to speed, all of this has been tabled?
And can
No,
someone-
just the
just the
Republican
Republican,
recommendations, the
okay.
Democratic and the unenrolled this
And
past.
now
Okay.
we're on the-
May I have a vote for it?
Okay, all in favor of the motion to table?
Thank you.
Did you guys vote on the Democratic ones? I don't.
We did.
Yeah,
We did, and the.
Vote was
and the
4-0,
Okay.
And
and the
Unenrolled was
unenrolled was
3-0.
3-0-1, because
3-0.
Mr. Foster was otherwise.
Yes, I was
With Mr. Foster
disposed.
abstaining.
He was providing tech support.
Thank
Are
you.
we up to speed?
We're done with subcommittee reports?
And you've already done subcommittee
Yep.
reports?
And you go to Long Meadow Shops.
Oh, man, I tell you, you whiz this by, don't you? Okay, we have a, caught you speechless, didn't I?
Yeah.
We have a presentation by the Long Meadow Shops, and I guess if you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Is this on? Is this, do I push this?
Yes, it's on.
No PA, it's
it's-
just for the
it's-
television
That's
audience.
just a TV mic, you won't hear us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Matt Whitmer from Phase Zero Design Architects. We're a retail-based architectural practice with offices in Boston and Springfield. We've actually been asked to come here this evening to represent the owner and operator of the shops at Longmeadow, which is Grove Properties. Stephen Walker, who many of you may know, his offices are at the shops at Longmeadow. Wanted very much to be here tonight. Unfortunately, he's actually out in Montana looking at one of their properties. But anyway, he asked me to go forward with this presentation. And I will say the purpose of this presentation is actually to begin the process with the town of Longmeadow, to start to look at the opportunity to seek a zone change, which would allow the shops at Longmeadow to expand. And I thought I'd take a little bit of time tonight talking a little bit about exactly what the shops is looking for, why they are seeking to expand, what the benefits are certainly to the community in this regard, and then certainly be here to answer any questions. We know that certainly starting this process is a lengthy process. It's a collaborative process. Certainly with the town, we have looked at, and I will show you tonight, some preliminary site plans that we put together for this proposed expansion, and certainly can talk a little bit to you about the thoughts with the design that we're looking to start with the town. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is, the shops at Longmeadow, as you know, is a lifestyle center. And it's a great synergy right now of both national and regional tenants, as well as some local mom and pops. And some of you may remember Grove Properties purchased the shops back about 20 years ago. At that point, they began a fairly involved process of improvements to the shops, both in the building infrastructure as well as the tenant mix. They've been lucky, certainly, to get some very strong national tenants. Have the Gap there, you've got Starbucks, you have Ann Taylor. It's certainly unique to see a development like this be so successful. Certainly that has to do with Longmeadow itself. We think the shops has become a real anchor to the community and something that's certainly beneficial to the town itself. Has become a real destination as a retail center as well, which is certainly exciting to see. As the shops has grown and progressed and become more successful, sometimes what happens is you become a victim of your own success. About 2-3 years ago, Grove Properties was tapped by a number of national retailers that wanted to come into Western Massachusetts. These are groups that are not necessarily interested in being in the Holyoke Mall. They wanted to be south of that into this area, into these demographics. Unfortunately, at this point, I can't tell you, who those nationals are, but I can tell you they're of the same quality and caliber of, say, Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn, Restoration Hardware. They're certainly very well-known tenants, and they certainly will strengthen the tenant mix that's there now. The issue with the shops is they've been very successful. We have 100% occupancy. We really don't have the space to do something like that. And one of the things that Grove Properties is very aware of is they do not want to lose a synergy of tenant mix that's there right now. You have Max Burger in there, you've got some great restaurants, you've got some mom and pops, you've got the nationals. We want to kind of maintain that, but be able to expand that. And some of that thinking is to come forward with an expansion that will allow some of these nationals to be accommodated and maintain the existing tenants that are there now. The desire for this is because Grove really wants to keep a viable, strong shopping center, here in the center of Longmeadow. With these tenants wanting to come to Western Massachusetts, it's certainly possible to imagine quite easily that another developer could build a center in Agawam or West Springfield or somewhere in that region and begin to attract these nationals. And then what happens with retail is that you see some tenants wanting to move. So, hey, am I really better served in Longmeadow? Do I want to maybe move to this new center? And what happens is you start losing tenants. It's something that Grove Properties has worked very hard to maintain at the shops, and certainly doesn't want to start seeing us go down that particular path. One of the
I'm just
absolutely.
having trouble visualizing. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine, and I will
have a better view of it.
definitely put that on the screen later on. Sure. The parcel that makes up the shops at Longmeadow is now zoned as both business and residential. The area to the east is currently residential. It's a small area of about 2 acres. It's between the Church of Scientology to the east and the shops to the west. The property is owned by Grove. What they are looking to start the process with the town of Longmeadow tonight is to seek a zone change to actually change that from A1 residential to a business zone, which would allow for a potential expansion. There are a couple of other things that they're looking at too, which would help to facilitate this, not only accommodate additional tenants, but also deal with some of the issues on the site. You know, many of you know that there's some access, some parking issues, some interior vehicular circulation issues. Those are items that we'd like to look to address as part of this and begin the conversations with planning and zoning to kind of strengthen this. I have on the screen the locus map of where the shops are and the business zone in the center of town, or at least in this area of town. And then also you can see the aerial showing the vacant space right now. That's partially a parking area where there is a farmer's market that takes place on occasion, and then the rest is an open field.
Farmer's market's on the other end of
The farmer's market is actually on this end of the site, but
Okay.
we would move it to the other end, yeah, as this moves forward. This is on the east side.
I've been to the farmer's market, it's been on the other side.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. We're talking about the space next to Bank of America?
Right.
Oh, okay,
Farmer's market's next to the baseball fields.
I was just there the other.
They moved it over.
Yeah, we.
Sorry, all right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not at all to argue. Believe me.
Yeah, that may be
What?
another one, because you're right.
It's at the, it's on the eastern end now.
Okay.
Yeah, they
I
moved it.
apologize.
You gotta
Okay.
go to the farmer's market
I guess
more
I
often.
Couple of concepts that, let me just see what comes up here. So, a couple of concepts we've looked at for the expansion, and this is something that I have up on the screen right now. We've looked at a couple of different ways to expand. One of them doing a mix of tenants on the east end. We took a look at this, played around with the idea. One of the biggest issues that we see is some of the way that the other tenants are served by the parking field. One tenant that is not doing a good job right now in serving the public is a CVS. Ultimately, what we looked at in coming up with a better plan is coming up with a CVS that is probably more appropriately sized to serve the Longmeadow community, and also includes a drive-through. This was certainly not the original concept. I can show you some concepts that we've looked at already. In fact, there's one right here that includes an expansion of just retail without relocating the CVS. But there are a couple of issues as well. Getting the appropriate tenant mix, where you have destination tenants that are pulling people in, that are more willing to park in not necessarily in front of the store that they're going to. Whereas you then have CVS, which is a one trip in, one trip out type of retailer. The parking field right now is not where the CVS is located. So we wanted to relocate the CVS and provide appropriate parking field for that. I wanted to free up some area for some additional tenants, increase the parking count, and also begin to work with some of the issues in the interior site circulation. I will add that a drawing went out to everybody in their packet on Friday, and this drawing right here is a further rendition of that, if you will. We've taken a look at the drop-off area, or rather the service area in the back, the drive-through for CVS, the drive-through for Bank of America, as well as some of the internal parking And there's been some modifications to that as well. And you may note that from some of the drawings that you have in your packet versus what's up on the screen right now. I can tell you the proposed expansion is 21,096 square feet as it's drawn here and presented to you tonight. The existing retail center is approximately 77,400 square feet. The proposal is looking to add an additional 106 cars, which would take care of the 21,096 square feet at one vehicle per 200. In addition to that, we are looking at adding an additional 48 spaces. We think that 48 spaces is a good number to deal with some of the restaurant that's there right now, help with some of the parking issues that are there, and also continue to provide enough open parking area to accommodate other events such as the farmers market, which is something that Grove Properties wants to maintain and continue. We also imagine that an expansion such as this would not only provide more jobs to the community, but probably somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000 in additional taxes to the town on an annual basis. We also think that this is a great center for the town. We want to keep it viable. We want to keep it fresh. We want to have opportunity to bring in new tenants. There can be some opportunity for national as well as mom and pop. And we think that this is just something that really will help this center remain viable and also be a great asset to the town of Long Meadow.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Can I just make one comment about process?
Sure.
The proposal, since this doesn't happen very often, we went and looked up what happens under these circumstances where a proposal for a zone change gets made to in town, and the proposal gets made to the select board, and then the select board shall refer the matter to the planning board. So in terms of next step for this proposal being made tonight, it gets referred to the planning board.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw that out there.
I sent out the zoning regs to each member so they could come up to speed on that.
Okay.
Richard, can I ask?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Whitmer, thanks for coming in. I have some question for you. It's unfortunate. I wish that Mr. Walker had been here, but the town just went through a year, give or take, of some protracted discussions because of the desire to reduce the amount of traffic or control and mitigate the amount of traffic that would be coming through our town. This was the MGM casino issue, and so can I get additional clarification? You talked about 106 cars of parking, and then you said 48 additional spaces. Can you just clarify how much additional traffic you folks are prepared to handle?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I appreciate that. I mean, the CVS is there right now and is existing. So really, what we would be doing is not bringing in I know we want to say CVS is a major traffic generator, but that is a use that is already here, a tenant that is already here. We would imagine bringing in additional retailers, which have a far less intensive traffic count. However, probably the best way to answer your question is that a traffic study has not yet been done on this. It is our intention to do that as we move forward with planning and zoning. We do realize that traffic is a concern in the town. We do not feel that this would be a major traffic generator. However, we understand that any increase in traffic would be looked at, and it needs to be evaluated. And we're certainly interested and willing to start that process to come up with this.
At the beginning of this, middle of this meeting, we all sat through about an hour and 15 minutes with a discussion about a group home, and relative to the map up there, this is impacting the same neighborhood, and I think it needs to be noted that right now the purpose of that residential zone area is to create a buffer, and this takes away that buffer almost in its entirety, and I clearly have a concern about that for the same neighborhood. I'm surprised that maybe these folks didn't realize what was coming, that they didn't stay behind, because some of these folks pretty much abut that. So that's clearly a concern of mine. But more importantly, I've lived in town now for just about 38 years or 37 years. I've gone through this with Long Meadow Shops before. And Mr. Whitmer, I know it predates you, but we had a significant bait and switch on the other side of, where we're asked for a zoning change, and you're nodding your head, and so I know you've heard the story. I can't imagine the people in town being fooled twice, by saying, just give me the zoning change and here's what we're gonna do for you, because we were promised something and got something different. Yeah, it was a whole different group of, potentially even owners, whole different group of managers, but it significantly changed the view of that area, and I think it went way beyond what was being promised at the town meeting. And I'd be reluctant not to say that. The other thing I'd like you to take back to Mr. Walker is that the Long Meadow Shops, over the last 14 months specifically, have been a less than perfect neighbor. We've had some significant issues with the folks behind the Long Meadow Shops in Pinewood Drive. We have a list of communications back and forth, and if Mr. Walker was here, I was going to ask him if he remembered his communications with Dr. Murnoff about the noise from Max's Burger and the exhaust fans, and the responses that we have, copies of the written responses he gave to Dr. Murnoff, which were pretty much go take a hike, although those weren't his exact words. Less than ideal in the kinds of things that, when every time the Long Meadow Shops has been given a variance or given a change and it's impacted the neighborhood, it's been negatively, and the response has been almost universally, we're bigger than you are, we're too big to fail, and look at how many taxes we pay. We pay, a lot of taxes. And my comment tonight to Mr. Walker would have been, if you want to go anywhere with this project, I just suggest you go back and check out all the things you haven't done in the last year as part of being a good neighbor that you really ought to do. Because if you think you got problems with 10 people behind you on Pinewood now, you're going to adjust that to 10 or 12 or 15 more people. And the people aren't going to stand for that, and they'll come out and force to our town meeting and make sure this doesn't pass. As you can tell, I've lived through this. I've lived through the bait and switch, and I use that term with very, very intent on what happened in the past with the Long Meadow Shops. I've lived through the discussions and the emails. Can you please take care of some noise problems? Can you please take care of some? All you got to do is put a barricade on the. In fact, the owner and our town building code advisor went up there and said, here's all you need to do. If you can put up just a fence on the roof around this exhaust fan and cut the noise. No, we're not doing that. We don't need to do that. There's some emails, as I said, that were pretty marked. And so my predisposition here is to tell Mr. Walker to go take care of what he's got and not worry about expanding too much, to not look forward to doing this. There's all kinds of issues. There's an additional curb cut and how that gets handled with traffic and on and on and on. And I say this despite the fact that I've been the largest proponent on this select board over the last 5 years of my tenure here for increased tax base for the town. The town clearly needs increased tax base, but not at the expense of what we've gone through in the last year with neighbor complaints about the noises and the odors and all the issues of the Long Meadow Shops, without the neighbors' issues that we've had with, just all we need is a couple more parking places. We got a couple more parking places, and then we got 500 times as many cars to go with those parking places. Our zoning bylaw changes have not worked in the past with the Long Meadow Shops. It was designed, I think, well by our predecessors with buffers in mind, and to eliminate buffers, in my opinion, would be an error. So I appreciate you listening to my comments. I hope you take them back to Mr. Walker, because I think we owe it to our town residents that we resolve the issues that are there before we go and create more. Thank you.
Can I just bother you? Can you spell your last name for me?
Yeah, I would like to respond if I
Sure,
may.
go ahead.
Let me give you my card.
Thank you.
If I may, I appreciate everything that you've said, and believe me, I have had conversations with Mr. Walker as well, and him not being here is nothing to do with certainly past history. You know, one thing you mentioned is a bait and switch, and it's always difficult for someone coming in to try to move forward after what has been done in the past. Certainly, you know, there are always issues with a mixed-use development, especially surrounded by a residential neighborhood as we have here. We've certainly worked in environments with shopping centers that are far more impacting than what we have here. You know, the items that you talk about are certainly not unsurmountable, and are certainly something that, you know, we do hope to address as part of this, and something that we, you know, fully believe can be addressed. There's certainly a strong desire, and I believe that those items you bring up aside, there is past history that supports this, that certainly Grove does want to be a good neighbor. It is unfortunate that some of these issues have not been addressed. However, you know, they have been points of discussion, and it is something that we certainly do plan to. Maybe that's not a comment that you're willing to listen to this evening, but I do believe that actions will bear that out, and I do hope that you give us the opportunity to certainly prove that. It is certainly of benefit to no one to have a center, a retail center, that isn't being a good neighbor or that is failing in some way, that doesn't provide to the community what it should be, especially in a community such as Longmeadow that is limited by the amount of retail they have, and certainly has something as valuable as what you folks do here in town. So, you know, I certainly welcome your comments. They definitely will be returned and responded to, and it is something that we've already been looking at. If that gives you any kind of
It absolutely does, but the problem is that my sense was without this request from the Long Meadow shops, none of that would happen. You know, it is a, you know, we need something from you now, so we'll go back and take care of what we needed to take care of. I mean, we've been, you know, I have saved every email. I'd be glad to share them with you that went through just that one incidence of the noise back and forth. And I understand there are two sides to every story, and I've only gotten perhaps one side, but it's not good. And so I appreciate your comments, but, you know, I hope you understand where I'm coming from, at least, that, you know, here we are, we need something from the town, so, yeah, we'll go back and take care of it, but, you know, once we get what we want, is it back to the same old way of doing business? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, and Mark, I think you raised good points. I'm aware of some of that. And it's funny because...
That was the first thing you did when you came to town, right? You got...
Well, no, I only recently met with Mr. Walker to discuss this proposal, and Mr. Whitmer was not there, but I can tell you that I had virtually an identical conversation with Mr. Walker. But I think the important thing for tonight is that, you know, the planning board will have a public process, and then, of course, if the planning board deems it appropriate, it'll be referred to the select board for then subsequent inclusion on a town meeting warrant. And so I think the public will have many opportunities to have their voices heard on this and be able to speak directly to the proposal and to Grove Property Fund LLC. So I share your concerns, and we'll be watching this one closely.
Anyone? Go ahead, Al.
So, I just had a couple of questions. There was some jargon that I didn't get, because you were talking about CVS, and you said it wasn't appropriately sized, and I might be remembering wrong, so let me know if I am. And then you needed a different parking field, and I didn't know what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Could you illuminate that?
Yeah, on the screen behind you actually is the CVS over on the
Right.
left, and you can see the number of spaces that are in front
Right.
of CVS
Yeah.
aren't typical of what we would see for a CVS. It doesn't support the activity that goes on in that environment as far as number of trips, number of individuals that are served.
See, I'm not understanding it. Are you saying it's not enough? Like it's not enough parking?
It is not enough parking,
Okay,
exactly.
all right.
Absolutely.
So you're thinking about moving them into this new part where they would get more parking
That's correct.
and be bigger?
Potentially, yes.
Because when you said it wasn't appropriately sized, I wasn't sure whether you thought it was too big or too small as it was now.
Certainly for the population that you have, it could be larger. It does
Okay.
need a fuller pharmacy. We've been talking about that. One of the other things that they're looking to do is add on a drive-through. Typically, drugstores in any kind of a environment, such as a
Right.
neighborhood environment, have a drive-through.
So here's the other thing. I was looking at this board, which I guess is probably something you also sent around, because you were talking about 48 additional parking spots, which I guess is one way of thinking about it. But unless I'm missing something, it says that you would have, the proposed parking would have 138 spaces. There would be 105 lost spaces. So you would have a net parking gain of 33. So in other words, to add in all this extra stuff, we have a net of 33 over what we have now?
No, if you
No,
look at the
that's-
bottom chart there, you actually have an additional 48 parking spaces total
Wait a
after
minute.
doing, see, you have two charts there. The
Yeah.
first chart talks about the parking count in terms of existing versus proposed. But when you actually do the math for what's involved with how much retail, what business, what restaurant requires,
I know, I understand,
based
but
on the
that,
zoning.
I understand there's sort of, you impute how much parking should go along with certain uses, right?
Well, actually, your zoning regs require
Right,
that,
I
yes.
understand, I get that part, but what I'm looking at is whatever the regulations say, I'm saying, what is the difference? And as I read this, we would have 33 more spaces than what we have right now.
That is correct.
Okay, so, given that you've got three pretty big things going in there, 33 probably isn't gonna handle those.
No. That's in addition to the parking that's being provided, the 106 spaces already to handle the new development.
But are you not taking parking away?
We are taking parking
I think
away.
that's what he's reading
However,
right
you're
here.
gaining 106 spaces, plus you have an additional 48 than what your zoning count requires.
Yeah, see, I'm not focused on that part. I wanna know, when you get done, how many more spaces or fewer spaces are you gonna have?
You're going to have 33 additional spaces.
Than
plus
what we have
100
right now.
no, Plus 106 to satisfy the retail component that's being proposed.
So you're saying, so that's, what,
139.
139?
Yeah.
See, that makes me think that the parking situation is gonna be worse than it is now. I mean, do you agree or disagree with
Well,
that?
what you're doing is, per your zoning regs, you're providing the count that's required to meet the additional
I get
retail
that
at
part. I get that.
106.
I'm not
And
focused
then
on that, though.
You're getting an additional 33 spaces, more than what you have now on site. So you're actually better, no, I don't know what the password is on this, I'm sorry. I don't think you want to have that video.
You want to broadcast that?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a big secret here.
Okay.
So, I mean, so do you think it would be better or worse?
Oh, it would definitely be better, because you've got 33 more spaces than you had before. Plus, you've satisfied the requirements of the addition. I mean, I don't see how you could be worse off.
See, I guess that's the part that I'm not getting. So, because these things are gonna, you're gonna be going over some area where there is parking right now,
Mhm.
right? So that's the lost. I guess I don't see how it gets better, but maybe that's me.
Well, if you consider more parking spaces better, it would be better. Certainly, what this plan also looks to do is try to modify some of the circulation internal to the site and,
Right.
and hopefully resolve that. Another thing that we're looking at too is doing a potentially an underground stormwater detention system, rather, to deal with stormwater management. But again, these are all, items that we'd want to address with planning and zoning, as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's a key point, because right now it's just a pass-through from our board to the planning commission within 14 days, and then they came in and made a presentation. And by the zoning regulations, we have 14 days before we pass it on to planning, and that's where the real investigation is going to start to come place, Alex, and all these questions are going to flush forward when they start getting into those elements on it. This was just an introduction to the board to let you see what was actually going to planning.
he came here, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. So there's a few things. There's no longer an Ann Taylor in the shops. They're gone, and we replaced it with a bank that's empty. The offices are empty still, so they're going through a merger, and I know they're deciding what to do. And so one of the thoughts I have is if there's so much demand for retail, why did we put office space on the first floor of a prime spot at the end unit of a mall? That was even before this proposal came. And I know it's because of money, right? They were paying the rent and so forth. The other question I have is the space that you're increasing over here on the side is very similar to the space that's currently at the shops on the side. It's not regularly used. It's ancillary space. It really doesn't solve the traffic flow of where CVS and Starbucks is and Max is and so forth. So the next question I would have for you guys, and I know it's going to go to the planning board, but CVS doesn't have enough spaces to serve its constituency, but yet there's going to be another business that goes in. And the question I would have is, are you going to limit the business that goes in to the number of spaces to serve the constituency? Or are we going to be back with another business that's going to draw just as much, if not better? The parking there is, and unfortunately, you cut off the part where the parking really starts to suck and get hazardous to people.
I do have other drawings.
Yeah,
if
no, I
you-
mean, but that thing that we have in our packet just cuts it off at the prime point of where the bottleneck is. And there's days where you can't find a parking space there. So I don't know if that side spot is going to alleviate the issues that's still over there. And I mean, those are going to be my questions when it goes before the planning board is, it's not going to solve the problems that are there. I don't know how we got into that parking lot situation. I know it was passed through zoning and so forth, but the other question I have is that this does not consist of any of the land from the Christian Science Church. This is all of the land, because there were some other proposals that were coming forward at one point to kind of merge those two pieces, and this is solely the land owned by Grove.
That's correct.
None of this, okay. That's it.
I do want to make a comment to that, though. I mean, many of you have mentioned tonight some of the issues with parking on site. And, the reality is, we intend to look at the site from a top down. A comment was made that, this won't solve the parking issues that are on the other portion of the site. I would argue that, in fact, we intend to take a look at the site as a whole and address the parking issues, and this is really the impetus for that. And that's some of the net benefit to, really to, and also to the center, because the center has to work. It's got to be effective in order for people to come there and shop. So there's certainly a desire to look at the whole center. The fact that the site is only working with a certain area doesn't necessarily mean that eliminates or precludes other portions of the site. Believe me, if we can address the issues throughout, that's the intention on this.
Okay. Any other questions? Your drive, pardon?
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to make a motion, so, but if you were going to
okay.
make a comment.
Your drive-through feature too is going to help quite a bit, because all of those cars now are going up and stop and taking up a space to run in and get an RX.
Absolutely.
And I've been in other states and been around the drive-throughs, and they're fairly busy. I mean, there's a lot of business, especially once they become accustomed to getting pretty quick turnover.
Right. And
There's
that's
a lot
also
of
a
RX
benefit.
business at that particular store too. So.
Appreciate the comment.
Just a
Yeah,
quick-
go ahead.
Quite a few years ago, the town of Longmeadow undertook a significant change to the traffic pattern in front of the Longmeadow shops. And I don't know if you went back to the history, but literally both those streets, both Bliss Road and William Street, were two-way streets. And the triangle part of it was kind of a nightmare. And so I guess the question is, what's the thought of the Longmeadow shops in participating in allowing for a traffic study that would, again, review that? I know it was interesting that at the time was determined to go one way, kind of make a huge rotary around the Big Y shopping area. Somebody came up with an even better plan, but they had already made all the curb cuts and done all that kind of stuff. So the question is, is there can there be a commitment by the Longmeadow shops to help the town do a traffic study there? We just went through, as I said, a lot of traffic, and more importantly, to assist financially in making those changes should they be necessary? As I said, the biggest thing I can see is, you may be creating 100 more parking spaces or 139 more parking spaces because you expect another 139 more patrons at one point or the other, or you wouldn't be adding shops there. So is there, how can we get that kind of a commitment from Grove Properties? And can we get that kind of a commitment from Grove
Well,
Properties?
it's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, I'm not prepared to answer that you can get a commitment, or not, but it would seem to me that if the town of Longmeadow undertook a traffic study just 3 years ago.
No, it was about 15 years ago.
Oh, 15 years
yeah,
ago?
yeah. That's when
Okay.
that was changed.
Okay. I mean,
But remember, even so, it was for a totally different number of vehicles. I mean, this is, when the traffic increases substantially. And like I said, the discussions we had with MGM were over, what was the number? 60 cars an hour? I mean, we're talking probably an equivalent number or something like that at peak on weekends or something like that.
I don't know about that. And this is stuff that all can be flushed out at the planning board. And I think that's where the more detailed numbers will come into
Okay.
play.
Fine.
And because your concerns are well taken. I mean, what we did learn through that process is if the existing configuration can handle all the cars it has today, but just a few additional cars puts it over that tipping point, then it's usually a costly and large solution. And obviously, while I agree, I don't know that we can even answer it today, that is something that I think the planning board should watch out for as they evaluate the project.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll certainly ask them to do that.
Yes.
And this is also the area of our high school, and we've got student drivers in the area, and on and on and on and on.
Yeah. I mean, certainly what's being proposed here is not a major trip generator. I mean, we have to understand that going into this, but I'm certain
It's
that
not a.
It is not. No, I'm sorry. I mean,
Well,
unfortunately,
wait a second, on a typical Saturday, how many customers do these new retail places expect to see?
by definition by the state, this is not a major trip generator. I mean, we may
That may be
see.
by definition of the state, but we can actually say they expect 20 customers, they each expect 50 customers,
I
and then we put a
understand
number
that.
to it, and in Longmeadow, you're gonna get probably 1.2 people per car, and you figure out how many more cars are coming in there in a 4 or 6 hour period of time, and there's only one route in and out. I mean, I'm not prepared to discuss, to review this, but.
I just don't want to be that point too.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying, Richard, if I just could, I'm gonna vote against taking this to the planning commission, and I'm gonna do that because I'd like Mr. Walker to come here with the solutions to the past problems before we agree, before at least I'm gonna agree to let him go forward to the planning commission, because the planning commission has no ability to hold it up based on making the corrective actions that I spoke about. I feel extraordinarily strongly that there are past issues that need to be addressed. They have not been addressed, and the nature in which they have not been addressed is concerning to me, and so I'm planning to vote against this, not as a permanent basis, but until we get some resolution of the current issues, and then we'll move it forward and potentially talk about creating new issues.
And I do understand your point, Mark, and I agree with your concerns, but I don't think we're in a position to vote on this because this is part of the zoning thing that says it's a pass-through. We have 14 days to release it to planning.
And what if we don't?
Well,
It can
you're
come
right.
up again, it comes up again,
What if
and
you
we
don't?
got 14 days.
What if you don't? Apparently, there's no legal remedies at this time. You're right, but that'd be another land case setting thing that I'm not sure we want to go to, because I think we could get most of this resolved if it goes to planning.
We
anyway.
absolutely have not, Richard, we have not been able to get, it has been unbelievably intractable with the response from Grove Properties. And that's the point I want to make to the select board. This has not been a neighborly kind of discussion. The neighbors simply asked, it's noisy, we can smell things, can you put up a fence? And he said, no. He said, and I'll read you the emails if we want to. I would encourage everybody to hold this up. This is the only leverage we have over Grove Properties. We've been working for a year off and on. The neighbor went so far as to take some intermediate steps on their own. They spent some money, they did some things, asked for some, and got a no. I would strongly encourage us to hold fast on this and see what happens. We can always put it through the planning board You know, I'm standing in front of a freight train,
What are
I'm
you-
trying to slow it down.
Well, what are you going to do? Because you're not empowered like the planning board to deal with this issue. I mean, there's got to get to
we've
the
got
planning board.
only if we say so.
No, it's an automatic
shall.
pass-through.
Well,
It's and let me just say, Mark.
is it an automatic pass-through?
It says according to the thing, it says the Board of Selectmen or City Council shall, within 14 days of receipt of such zoning ordinance or bylaw, submit to the planning board for review. And I think I'd say, Mark, is, as I said, I heard the complaints, I was involved in some of it as well. I agree with you.
So
If you
what's
don't-
our leverage?
If you don't let this go forward, we have none. If you let this go forward, then they are in the position of needing something from the town, and that's where, through the planning board process, and if they need a special permit or something else that conditions can be attached to it, that's where you put your hooks in them to get the things resolved. But holding it up now, you miss that opportunity, and
Wait a minute, that makes no sense. I mean, I actually take your point. I'm sorry, Richard, I should have
Yeah,
asked for
that's okay, Alex.
I should have asked for recognition first.
His hand was sort of.
They get no
Yeah.
respect.
I'm sorry. But that doesn't make any sense. I mean, we get more leverage if we pass it on. That's what he wants us to do. Now, I looked at the statute too. Okay, it does say shall submit. I get that. I think the remedy for, if we don't, but I think it also says the select board has to do it. So there's no way it goes forward unless we vote to do it, okay? I think their remedy is to sue us and to try to force us to do it for not shall submitting. What I would propose is that, and this is my motion, I would move to submit this zoning proposal from Grove Properties to the planning board under this statute. I think it's called Chapter 40A, Section 5, with an unfavorable recommendation, so that the planning board understands that it's not coming with our seal of approval. And then the planning board can take it up in that posture. That's my motion. And I think that makes the point that you're trying to make, and follows the statute.
Second?
I'm going to second for discussion purposes.
Okay.
If you don't mind if we can discuss.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
I agree with Mark in the sense of the issues that we've seen in the past, and I've been on the board for 9 years, and there's been issues in the past. And on the flip side of it is there are some good things that the shops have allowed and done and so forth. So, I guess the concern I have is, we've heard a piece of a proposal, and I looked on another document and I found the whole drawing with a whole parking lot and,
Yeah, and I do have that here tonight to present to you.
And then I just found, and I said that up there, stop, but I wanted to know as I could find it. My gut would tell me that this is probably not something that I would really like to see unless I think it was fully disclosed, and I'll give you an example. I don't want to see another restaurant in the shops. I don't want to see another liquor license issue, but that's me personally, I'm not speaking for the board. But I don't know why I would be unfavorable or favorable. I think I would just say, move it on. And then, before it goes to the town meeting, I would like to have Mr. Walker come in and discuss that, because it's gonna have to go into the warrant. If that proposal can fix the rest of the parking situation in the shops, then it might be worth listening to. I will say, I do believe there's gonna be a lot of trips generated, regardless of how the state defines it. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't be doing it if you didn't think there was something. I do have a concern of what would go there, for example. And you guys run your business, you wanna put a bank on the first floor and then say we need more room for expansion. It's your land, we're not talking about combining the two. I originally thought this was the combining of the two pieces of property with the church. But again, if I can see the rest of this parking fixed with that submission, then I might be more willing to look at it. But I also think that there have been some issues that do need to be addressed before I would vote in favor of something like this publicly at town meeting or before it goes on to the warrant article. So I second it for discussion, but I would move to pass this on as we are required to.
Richard? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to respond to Paul's point. I guess the concern I have, and I hear your point, and I considered that. Okay, let's just move it on, because I don't believe it's a pass-through, because we do have to actually vote for it. But I don't want the history to be written that, like, there's been some momentum generated by this vote.
Okay.
And that somebody can spin it later on. Well, the select board voted, we made a presentation to the select board voted to submit it. See, to me, voting to submit something implies a certain level of approval. And, from what I've seen, I don't want to put that approval on this project at this juncture.
I understand.
Alex has convinced me.
Okay. I sent the regulations out on this, and, I mean, there's a lot of ways this can come in from a citizen's petition, and and we know that we can't stop a citizen's petition. There's a lot of ways it can go through. I've heard your point, and I agree with everything you said, Mark, and I sincerely believe that it is time to talk to the present conditions or the existing conditions that were ignored. And I think that's very much part of our debate that we will have with our own planning department, because this has to go through public hearing. This is not a pass down and a bypass to go into to warrant without opposition. And we have every right in the world to stand up and speak at a town meeting in opposition to this, very strongly speaking, if these conditions are not met. And I think what you've done is opened a dialogue tonight to where I'm sure you will carry back some of what you've heard tonight and prepare to come back with some answers. But for us to venture into uncharted territory again and try to hold this up, we're just inviting a lawsuit or a bypass process. If we let it get to the next step, it's going to go to the planning board, and then there's 65 days for public hearing, so there's going to be a due process to take place. I mean, that's my feeling. I don't want to bypass any of the rights that we have as board members, but to delay something for the purpose of delay when we still have every right in the world to voice very strong opposition to this as it goes through the steps, especially if we find that the needs for this town are not being met, Art. And I sincerely mean that, and I will stand with you strongly and voice concern against this if those other concerns are not met. But at this point, I'd like to see us just pass it on to the planning board so we can at least get it to that point. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, we're not saying it's going to go through, we're just getting it to the next legal step in the process.
This motion does that, yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that I'm with you. I'm not proposing that we just try to delay it, but I think it's I think it's telling in a way that they're making the presentation to us.
Mm-hmm.
They could have, as you say, it could have been residents. I think the Long Meadow Shops is coming to us because they want to begin getting our seal of approval.
Right.
And I just want to make it clear that we're submitting it, but we're not trying to endorse it in any way.
Yeah, we're one of 9 methods.
Yeah, right. So why not do it that way?
Right.
But they chose this way.
Well,
because this is
it can get. I'm sorry, Alex. It can get to here in 9 different ways, but
Right.
the only way to get to the planning board is through the select board.
Unless it comes in as one of the 150 voters that put it on the thing, and we can't stop that action. That goes right straight on in.
Okay, well, I just, if I can add something, I voiced my concerns, and I think that as it stood, I wouldn't be in favor of unless it could allay concerns. So,
Yeah.
actually, that goes along with what Alex said, is that it's passing it on to the planning board without endorsing it. And I think that's a legitimate motion. It passes it on, and it just refers that it's not something that, at least and again, my gut would tell me not to vote for this in this form without knowing a lot more facts. And
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see anything particularly wrong with that, because we have every right in the world to either endorse or not endorse the proposal as we pass it through.
So I think we're there.
So, what is the motion?
Mr. Grant made a motion to submit the zoning proposal from Grove Properties to the planning board under the statute 40 section A.
40A, Section 5.
40A section 5 under B, and that's where I kind of lost you.
Oh,
With-
with an unfavorable recommendation.
Thank you. With an unfavorable recommendation.
Okay. Discussion?
We've had it.
All in favor? All opposed? I just don't think it has any bearing on whether we endorse it or not. I think we've got plenty of road down the road to speak against this motion. All right.
That's it.
That's it. I think.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, sir. I appreciate your help tonight, Paul.
This
Could we
Make a motion to adjourn?
entertain a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And good evening, folks. And our next scheduled meeting will be August 4th, 2014. Thank you. Thank you, sir.